Okay, well, hello and welcome back to our afternoon session. And thank you to all of the partners, the resellers, the buyers, and the MSPs who have already attended this morning's sessions. We have been absolutely overwhelmed with the number of views we've had. And I've just heard that we have already hit over 2,500 views of this morning's sessions. And we've got even more value add for you in the next 3 sessions that we have this afternoon. So please make sure you keep liking, you comment, you share, and get engaged with our speakers whilst you have them at your disposal. So up next and shortly in a minute, I'm going to introduce the lovely Matt Solomon from ID Agent. We're then going to move into the next session, which will be Joel Shimondes and Simon Kitson from the Maverick team within Tech Data. And then we're going to finish with very special guest Rob Ray and also a surprise guest that will be joining our fireside chat. So without further ado, I am going to pass over to the man who knows the security space better than anybody else I know. It's the lovely Matt Solomon. Matt, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Fiona. Maybe you need to know a few more people in security then.
I'm loving your LinkedIn shows at the minute. They're great.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much for having me.
So Matt, you and I have talked for a long time about, I think obviously, dark web monitoring is a fantastic and probably one of the best sales and prospecting tools a partner can use today. So I'm really looking forward to you sharing how we can use that to generate more business in the future. So really looking forward to your session, and I'm going to pass over to you.
Thank you very much. Excellent. Well, my name is Matt Solomon, Vice President of Business Development with ID Agent. As Fiona mentioned, we focus on dark web monitoring. We also have phishing and security awareness training and multi-factor authentication. So really today, I'm not here to sell you on ID Agent. I'm really here to educate you on kind of the state of security, what's going on in the MSP space, some of the top, topics that are, really important conversations that you should be having with your customers. And then we'll share really, one of the cool things we do is we actually share snapshots from the dark web. You guys are probably sick and tired of hearing your customers tell you that they're too small for these things to have an effect on them, or they're not being targeted. But we have slide after slide that actually shows them that they actually are a target. And so that's what we're going to show you. And then we'll go over some examples of how MSPs are using some of the security services to really have much broader conversations around the entire security stack, but really also their own services, getting their foot in the door based on these conversations. So we'll go ahead and get started here. And just kind of acknowledging what's taking place first, obviously, the dramatic shift in priorities in the MSP space, right? In February, we're focusing on growing your business, acquiring customers, of course, always improving efficiency. And now March and beyond, staying in business is top of mind, retaining all of your customers, making sure you're providing as much value to your customers, of course, reducing costs and improving efficiency. So just kind of acknowledging that. And, we'll certainly talk about that in terms of how we're messaging things a little bit differently in the security space. But these are some of the key market messages that we believe, and really the first 8 were something we were already talking about. Of course, we added remote work to the list. But we truly believe, honestly, that there's no better time to be talking about security. I mean, how can anybody that's now working remote not have conversations around multi-factor authentication? If these customers of yours haven't done phishing simulations to get a baseline understanding of where their customer base is in terms of security, this is the time to start rolling those out. So there's a lot of opportunity through education to start selling security and a couple other things. So one of the biggest topics that we kind of focused in on is this idea of zero trust. If you've not heard that concept, it's the idea that you have to assume everybody's been compromised at this point, some type of credential, whatever that is, that they have been compromised. So you have to put the policies in place. And that's really the cool thing about what's taking place right now with this remote work. I think it empowers MSPs. Here in the States where I'm from, being deemed essential workers, I think that's kind of been around the world as well. And so there's an empowerment in that phrase. And I think it's an opportunity to start rolling out really documented policies around security. Finally, when your customers have been pushing back on this. So the idea, again, was zero trust, having the right people with the right security access, with the right machines, with the right privileges, of course, And on the back end, we believe it's important to monitor for those dark web credentials because it's helping mitigate some of that risk. Being aware of those exposures is certainly important. Obviously, another topic that's been happening over the last couple of years now, really, that MSPs are also under attack. So it's obviously critically important that you are also eating your own dog food, right? You're preaching all these security things, making sure that you're actually implementing them within your MSP. Hackers are taking advantage of that concept of one to many, right? They go after one MSP because you guys hold the keys to a bunch of small and mid-sized organizations. And really, this is a message I think you can relay to your law firm clients, any of your professional services clients, accounting firms, things like that. Anybody that has that one to many, they are a massive target because, again, hackers are always looking for the easiest way in, and that is a much easier way to get one to all of a sudden getting 100 in a single kind of swoop. So definitely a topic you not necessarily putting the MSPs are under attack, but again, that one-to-many concept for some of your customers, depending on what sectors you're selling into. I certainly do not need to preach GDPR here on this webinar, but just kind of acknowledge, in the States, GDPR is starting to come to America slowly, state by state, but it's really empowering the MSP to have conversations around compliance, obviously, but really marrying that into the security conversation. I think the combination of the two go really well together. And as you're looking for like webinar content, look, GDPR compliance is not like the sexiest topic, but if you can put it together with a security conversation, I think you can really blend the two in to make a really interesting conversation and really try to drive more traffic to that webinar that you're doing. So phishing attacks are surging. I mean, the FBI put out something here in the States around April 6th. We knew this was occurring way before the FBI put out this kind of warning that phishing attacks were surging. Phishing attacks are surging regardless of COVID-19, but I think it's important to acknowledge that, and I was reading some stats, I think around 80% of malicious attacks currently are COVID-19 related. And that's important for your customers to know. They need to know that hackers have evolved very quickly, and in many cases are ahead of like public companies and some of this stuff. They're smart, and I actually have examples which I'm going to share with you of some of those actual phishing attacks. And these are great things to share with your customers because they need to be aware that these are taking place and make sure that their employees know what's going on here. So the CDC here in America put out. Well, they didn't put out this. It's a phishing attack, making it look like it was the CDC. And this is like really dead on in terms of like what it looks like. Typically, there's a few things you would do, which is hover over a link to see where it's actually leading to, looking at where it came from. But where it came from is pretty slick. I mean, all they did was add a dash, and instead of .gov, they did .gov.org. So unless your employees are trained to look for those things, that is a really sophisticated phishing email and very easy to fall for. And that gets into where security training needs to be part of the culture of an organization, especially now with remote work. I don't think there's any excuse not to have that being rolled out to your customers at this point. I'll show you a couple other examples. And again, this is examples of how efficient they are at changing the direction of what they do with their phishing emails. So apologies, for the blurriness of this slide, but some of these are snapshots from the dark web. So this is a workplace policy. Think about all the workplace policies that are going out right now. The messages around, hey, we're going to be, going back into the office at this time. Look, we also know that there's going to be spikes. If people are going back into the office, there's likely going to be spikes, and they might, within 24 hours, might have to be back remote, and there's going to be policies that are being sent out. And this is obviously trying to take advantage of those concepts. Here's another one. This is more related to a Singapore specialist around safety measures. Everybody's looking for what's the next thing to make yourself more safe, your family more safe, your business is more safe. Very easy to fall for this type of thing. And then think about with all of the employees working remote, what's the likelihood that they are actually viewing this on their cell phone, their mobile phone versus their computer screen, which, think about on a mobile device, that's a lot harder to see the differences, in these phishing emails. This is, an example. in an Italian phishing email. So this is to articulate that this is happening worldwide. I'm in here in the States, it's happening to us. This is happening worldwide. It doesn't matter what languages they adjust, they put this stuff out and they are attacking everyone. Here's actually an example in the UK. I think I read a stat that around 2,000 fake COVID-19 websites are going up on a daily basis. So look how they're taking advantage of the government assistance that are going out there, right? So enter your postal code postcode to apply for the COVID-19. You do that, then of course you're going to start getting messages, and they're going to take you down a path with malware and things like that. Another one to be aware of, SMS is surging as well with the government-related things. So again, very easy to fall for these types of stuff. Kind of taking a step back into just phishing in general, I think I want to make sure that you guys understand how easy and how many people, like, you don't have to be some really sophisticated hacker to put these phishing emails together. There's actually phishing kits that are available on the dark web, step-by-step guides on how to build out a phishing campaign, right, with customer service. I'm not kidding, just like a real business. And as you'll kind of watch me go through the slide deck, think about how you can deliver the same type of message to your customers. Again, I'm not here to sell IDH, but if you happen to be a partner and you're listening, we allow you to use a lot of the slides I'm showing. So please take advantage of that if you are already a partner of ours. This is an example of one side of this is a real Facebook page and the other side is the fake one. And I always forget when we go through these slides which one our one of our developers put together. But look at like how exact on that is, the logos, the Pantone colors. It is no different when you look at it. I think it's the one on the left that the .html is the fake one. But again, and even imagine this on a mobile device, how much harder that would be. There's really no difference, right? Here's another example. I think I have one more example that I'll show, but really just absolutely no difference when you're viewing it just from the visual standpoint of the actual website. And again, that's why it's so critical that your employees, it's just hammered into their soul almost to know what to look for. We actually have a document, and we've kind of gone on this 20 seconds of hand washing concept where it's 20 seconds. If something looks off to you, spend 20 seconds following the first 4 steps or 5 steps that to identify a phishing campaign. So we've started seeing some of our partners roll that out to their customers, and we've gotten pretty good feedback about it. It's just a way to get people to start thinking a little bit more so that they don't obviously click on anything that they would think is fake. Another topic that's fairly new is this concept of ransomware to public extortion. I just think it's fascinating to hear about this and see where it's going. So you may have heard about the TravelX hack and the Allied Universal hack as well. So what ended up happening is these companies were breached, and they basically said, we're not paying the ransom. And we are all told, we hear from the experts that we're not supposed to pay the ransom. So hackers are evolving, right? They now know that that's what people are trained to do, not pay the ransom. So now what they're saying is, we're going to extort you. In addition, if you don't pay the ransom, because what we're going to do is we're going to make it public that you actually have a breach. And here's the interesting thing with Allied Universal, and this gets into the GDPR compliance, is once they made it public, it forced Allied Universal to acknowledge it because of GDPR compliance. And so now they're dealing with a much larger issue, right? That they may not have been ready to talk to publicly yet. And so you're dealing with 2 kind of parts to it. And I don't think at the time they believed that the hackers were going to start publishing the data, which is what part of the extortion part. And they slowly started putting the data out there. And it's still, I haven't really looked at the updates. It was an ongoing thing for a while. I don't know what kind of came of it at the end of it, and I'll have to check that out. But the point is, this is an evolving space. I don't know that there's this great answer for this yet, but it's something to be aware of because it is starting to happen. Another very popular thing that's starting to take place. I mean, God, we have everything as a service now, and so do hackers. They have something called ransomware as a service. This gets into the idea that you pay a service fee and you get all these different perks, different ransomware variants. I'm going to show you a slide, the next slide actually, and it's when I'm in person, it's the one slide usually where I get a lot of photos taken. Really, my next 2 slides, I think. This is, if I was showing you a dashboard of what it is to look like when you log in as an ID agent partner, I would tell you two things. That is a multi-tenant environment and white labeled. And that is exactly what you're looking at for ransomware as a service, right? Giving you updates on the victims that they've put out, the new update programs, the fix critical AV bugs, so they're fixing bugs in their platform. And again, this is just to articulate to your customers that this is real. This is not some 16-year-old kid in his basement. Still exists. They still do hacking, obviously, young kids, but these are really sophisticated companies now that are doing this. So the next slide, again, just kind of building on that. Each slide starts building on this concept that, hey, this is real. This is a job ad from the dark overlords that they're hiring. They've got $762,000 annual salary with the expected increase based on performance reviews. So again, that concept, just like a real company, would increase your salary. So here are some other snapshots from the dark web, so you can understand what we're dealing with here. So this is a database collection. The media kind of dubbed this the mega breach. It's really a collection of the bunch of breaches over the last 5 to 10 years, but it was a massive group of data, 773 credential exposures, and because it had been repurposed so many times, they were selling it for $10 a data dump. So really, anybody, doesn't matter what level of sophistication as a hacker, could have had access to this data. And you'll notice there's a rating, so they got communications, quality of data, again, just like a real company. And again, as you start to go through these slides with your customers, or as you're presenting, this idea that they're not targets, maybe now they're not specifically targets their company, but they're getting swept under the into these breaches from these third-party websites, so they're absolutely part of this target audience. Again, hackers evolved. When it was around the holidays, they offered a holiday discount. They were being festive. This one is in the States, from Miami, Florida. They're honing in on small corporate 201 credit card dumps. So again, obviously, these are small businesses. So I've got some UK snapshots. This is Barclays. So this is the ability, I believe, to open accounts through Barclays. Again, you start seeing, I realize it's small text, but you start seeing refund policies that they've got rolled out in there. So again, here's one out of Denmark. This is a credit card dump, ability to buy credit cards. French passport scan utility bill, right? Because a lot of times you have to show proof of a bill. So they've got all that in there. And electricity bill is no older than 3 months. So really sophisticated stuff within these. This is worldwide credit cards. I always like to read the fine print. It's just really interesting to see, what they're willing to do for their customers. That's usually where the customer service. But these are more than 2 million credit cards from all countries that they have. So this again is targeting everywhere across the world. Again, this one's Germany. These are valid at minimum of 6 months. It looks like. By the way, they offer a bulk discount. This one doesn't offer refunds. Unusual. A lot of them do offer refunds. This one says don't buy. So just really interesting. And again, you start to get into curation of content. So this one, where again they focus in on top-notch rated cards. So they're looking at the credit scoring of the owner of the credit card. So they're bringing in only the best in these cases. So curating the list for you. And again, bank accounts. So I know I've hammered home quite a few snapshots here, but it's really just to give those examples so that they see that these are real things happening out there on the dark web. This one is brand new. I've only shown it like 2 or 3 times, and again, I apologize for the blurriness. I just think it's fascinating. It's essentially fraud on top of fraud. So this is a daily newsletter that's going out on the dark web, warning other hackers of scams taking place on the dark web. It's a bit meta, but I just think it's fascinating to see, the kind of the levels that this stuff is starting to go at. Of course, very timely conversation. I mean, the numbers are way higher now, but obviously Zoom was dealing with Zoom accounts being posted on the dark web as well. To Zoom's credit, they definitely came out fast and furious in terms of fixing a lot of security bugs. So it's definitely a credit to them. But certainly something to be acknowledging, making sure customers understand, when they're if they make a Zoom link public, kind of what the steps are to, make sure that you're making people go into a lobby, you're making them register, things like that. And I think that's a great, obviously, a topic area to get in front of them when you're looking for certain topics. Zoom, Teams, great areas. Your customers are new to probably Teams, right? And Teams is incredible, and I don't sell Teams. So, but the point is, they don't know how to utilize all of that. So that is a great way to get in front of your customers and provide that extra value that everybody's looking for right now. So, almost taking a step back, going kind of back to the original concept of these credential exposures. I mentioned that zero trust, that everybody's compromised at this point. So one of the issues is that we're creating chaos. Everybody has to log into so many applications. That's why password management is certainly a nice piece to this. But really, the idea is employees are logging into more applications than ever, and probably a lot of non-work related applications that you have no idea that they're using their work emails on. So again, shifting to that conversation around DNS filtering, there's a lot of things with policies you can discuss, but the problem is humans cannot remember that many passwords. So it is human nature to repeat passwords or derivations of passwords. It's really interesting. Now we're seeing a lot more companies requiring 2FA, which is great. That's definitely something you need to be doing. But even I can speak in America, Bank of America, for example, they don't even let you use the exclamation point anymore, because for some reason that is the one special character everybody does, and it's the one derivation that people will do as well, right? It's change your password from Lakers 1 to Lakers. They'll change it to Lakers exclamation point. So that's why they've actually started eliminating that as a special character. And unfortunately, passwords are very predictable. We actually put out a report. It's a pretty fascinating little report on kind of the most popular passwords, but we actually dive into the actual categories of passwords, names that are being out there. One tip I can tell you, please stop using your favorite sports team in your password. That is so accessible. Think about what's accessible in these, in your Facebook profiles. That is one of the most common things. You see it's number 4 on there. Your kids' names, your birth date, your graduation years. Eliminate those. Those are really bad. I mean, big phrases with special characters right now is probably the best way to combat that. Obviously 2FA, and of course, password management is another way of doing that through single sign-on. Because at the end of the day, all of these breaches all mostly stem from a single compromised credential. Almost every big breach you've ever heard of has stemmed from a compromised credential, even the smaller ones. So of course, phishing, we've already really talked about. Brute force attack. I don't know if you guys are out there that are aware of the complexity of what they do. So let's talk about LinkedIn. So that was one of the breaches that really affected everybody. So they will take that email and password from LinkedIn and run a script on the 500 most popular websites on the internet and see if that email and password match up. And that's where it starts to get a little hazy in terms of the risk, right? You may have changed employees. Once they've left the company, you may have changed their Active Directory or shut off their Active Directory. But do you really know where they were logging in? What if they still have their CRM system login? And now I can, through the LinkedIn password, I'm able to log into a CRM system and I have access to every one of your customers. So that's why, and this is why this data empowers you, because we have so many partners who then are able to really finally implement onboarding and offboarding policies, which for some reason, you get a lot of pushback on offboarding policies. Now this really starts to empower you guys. So now I'm going to kind of switch gears and just give you some examples of how MSPs in security have started really using security as a tool to really generate revenue. And this is one of the coolest things I've actually ever heard, and I'd never thought of using phishing simulation within your own client base to really upsell phishing and security awareness training. And so this example is an MSP that had a break-fix customer of 10 years. And they finally convinced them, 25 employee company, they finally convinced them, hey, can we please run a phishing simulation? And they agreed to it. 92% of the employees clicked on the email. Obviously, that's terrible. But the worst one is that, so we allow you to submit data after you click it. We don't store that data, but we actually allow you to submit your credentials. And 54% of them submitted their credentials on a fake phishing email. So then when they walked back into that meeting with the customer, they had their dark web report, they had their phishing report, obviously, and turned a 10-year break fix customer into a 3-year contract. And I apologize, it's in US dollars, 252,000 US dollars over 3 years, right? So just from those 2 reports. And that's, again, until this happened, I'd never thought about really using the phishing simulations as a way to really break through and get your customers to understand. But if they're pushing back on a lot of security services and maybe even in the past not letting you do phishing campaigns, now's the time to say, hey, we have got to have a baseline. We've got the entire workforce going remote. We've got to have a baseline understanding of where your employees are from a security awareness training, from a security understanding, especially with phishing emails, because that is the #1 tool to get into an organization through phishing, getting the compromised credentials. So I think this is something that I would be rolling out to all my customers now and saying, I would even say it's mandatory that we're going to at least do a test. You don't have to necessarily charge them for the first one. Just say we need a baseline and start rolling that out to your customers. I think it's a great way to then generate through education. So that's the beauty of this. This is an educational report that you're able to present to them. You're no longer selling, you're educating them. And it's great to be able to do the education and selling at the same time. This is an example, reach out to your local chambers. Actually, I saw a UK MSP partner of ours is doing this right now. They were offering free dark web scans to their entire chamber. What a great way. And it doesn't have to obviously just be for like security service, but whatever you're trying to get in front of, the local chamber is such a great benefit. I can tell you, on the security side, there's a lot of things that they're not aware of. So it's a great thing to be talking security in front of them. But this gentleman, James, has actually shared, was in front of his chamber, and this was in person. But right now, obviously, you can shift to online. Chambers are doing that, of course. But the right person was in the chamber and then asked him to co-host for an entire month of tech talks on a local radio show. So just a really great way to take advantage of the audience that's in front of you. And again, I would argue no better time to be talking in front of a chamber because they are looking for content, and you guys have a lot of great content that you're able to talk about. And I think that essential worker stamp of approval is something you guys need to leverage. Make yourself celebrities locally. Get out in front of your community. This gentleman actually just really through social media used one of our videos that we had and put out there that he was offering free dark web scans. He was able to get several inquiries from that. But even more importantly, maybe he was able to get CRN to publish an article because of what he was doing. I guess they caught wind of it. They decided to write an article, and obviously, that's the type of publicity that you'd be looking for. This partner of ours out in the Netherlands, I mean, they reached out to their local morning show. I mean, what a great way. I mean, this is free publicity. So they had like a 2-minute segment on local news, and again, I would argue local news. Is looking for all kinds of topics. They're always looking for content. So make them a friend of yours. They will start using you, especially if you do a good job. They will come back to you time and time again. So these are 2 examples of just COVID-19 success stories that I also wanted to share. This is related to one's really related to LinkedIn Reach Out. We had a partner of ours who reached out to prospects or people in his network, and he wasn't selling anything. He was really just reaching out and saying, hey, I know everybody's these are tough times, just please let me know if there's anything I can do. And he got like 6 MRR deals out of just reaching out to his network. Very basic stuff, and again, was not selling anything. I also highlight vertical reliant. I mean, we know MSPs in certain verticals. I mean, dental verticals, if that's your one vertical, it's a struggle right now, right? Because a lot of dental offices have been closed and only open for emergency types of services. But we had an MSP that was focused on the dental market, and he did reach out to his local chamber, and he was able to get 4 project pieces of work from that by getting in front of his chamber and non-related to the dental industry. So finding different ways, who would have ever thought, like, churches and gyms are now absolutely reliant on technology, streaming as a service, you want to call it. There's a lot of stuff that, if you're speaking to a big audience, there's a lot of worry that if you don't know what you're doing on these streaming services, that you're going to mess up in front of thousands of people, right? So having the MSP to be able to support you is an interesting thing. I'd never thought of that, obviously, until things took place around COVID. But there's a lot of new things, and I mean, with what is taking place on the reliance of technology, in the short term, obviously everybody's struggling in terms of, like, lowering counts and things like that. But I think in the long term, MSPs are in an incredible position because small businesses are absolutely reliant on technology. It is now being proven out. How can you, I mean, I know Rob Ray's coming up here in a couple segments. How can you not be talking about backup, disaster recovery? You now have to have pandemic response plans. So it really, a lot of this to me is going to empower the MSPs in the industry. And really the last thing I'll leave you with in terms of my slides here, we do have a free giveaway that, for anybody that's listening in. It's idagent.com/practicebuilderlive. And it's really just a remote work resource kit. Just the idea that you can present something to your customers. It's a checklist, so very simple, and obviously for yourself as well. Make sure you're doing kind of the best practices. But we've got some infographics that we're making available as well that you can repurpose as your own. But again, that's just available on the website there. And obviously I welcome everybody to connect with me on LinkedIn. Once the segment is over, and I think Fiona is going to be coming in here in a minute, I'll also give you guys my tag for LinkedIn, because I do post a lot. I really try to give best of practices for LinkedIn, and I'd love to connect with the MSPs across the world.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Matt. As usual, I'm astonished by some of those figures and just how realistic some of the attacks are today. So I really appreciate you sharing that with all of our audience. So we have 30 minutes, well, 29 minutes left actually. So we're going to go into a Q&A because we've loads of questions coming in around security. But just a shout out to all of our partners that are listening from all over the world. Please use the social channels to put your questions in. We are very lucky to have Matt, who is the security expert, here with us today. So please use the opportunity to send your questions in the chat box, and I will make sure that I ask Matt on your behalf. And please comment, like, and share so that we can get this message out to more of your colleagues and business partners. So Matt, you and I have had lots of discussions, especially from a sales perspective, because I love the whole dark web monitoring. I can see why we need to use it. But one of the fears partners always have is, what is the best way for me to present the data back into customers? Because some of them feel like, you're almost scaremongering them to say, oh, I've got data, or I've got this information on you. What tips and advice would you give partners about that?
Yeah, so it's interesting because we do have a live data search where you can literally put the domain of an organization. It pulls up the 100 most recent emails and passwords on the dark web. And now it does mask the passwords after 4 characters because we want to diffuse kind of the pushback. But what you brought up is absolutely a concern, and more particularly in the UK and in Europe. It's funny, I've done these presentations. I'll give you a couple examples, but yeah, one of the ways, and it's not for everybody, so I'll say that. But when you're in front of an audience, one of the fastest ways to capture their attention after you've gone through a presentation like that, and I'll give you 2 versions you can do. One of the ones I did, though, is I knew who was attending my webinar. So I had 29 MSPs attending a webinar. And at the end, I said, look, the next slide I'm about to show you, it's no personal information. It's not to embarrass anybody. It's just to articulate how big of an issue this is. And the next slide came up, and it was actually the number of credentials of every MSP in the room. Okay, it's just a number. But my call to action after that number, I said, look, I am more than willing to share the data with you. If you'd like to see your information, shoot me an email, and I'll send it to you. Within 10 minutes of hanging up on that webinar, I had 17 emails in my inbox. I've never had that kind of quick call to action. Yeah. If you're in front of an audience, of course, if you have a trade show booth or whatever, that would be your call to action. Now, if you're not comfortable doing it like that, we've seen people do envelopes, which is a great way, right? You give them their envelope number, and at the end you say, look, please open your envelope. That's the number of credentials your organization has. Please swing by. We'll show you the report. So that's, and I can tell you in Australia, they loved that when I did that thing. When I did it in a big DattoCon event, actually, and there was a hush over the audience. So I don't know that it went over as well in Europe, but what really the thing is, I don't believe you're actually doing it. Put it this way. There's a fear-mongering way of doing this, or you can do it through the educational way, right? So,
Yeah.
I mean, when I was originally reaching out, this is before we were in the MSP space and we were selling to enterprise. I mean, my concept was fairly simple. I just sent an email. I said, this is what we do. We do dark web monitoring. You have X number of credentials on the dark web. Can we jump on a call? I will show you the data. So again, you're not holding the data hostage, and I'll provide you the context. And I mean, 1 out of some, 25, maybe 30 would get a little testy. But again, anybody that got that way, I would be like, look, I'll share the data with you here. Yeah. I always prefer to get on a phone call because you want to provide context. But if anybody ever pushes back, be like, you know what, here's the data. And then if you want to have a conversation, let me know. But when you're bringing it into a meeting that you're already, have established some relationship with, it's not fear mongering, because this data is absolutely out there on the dark web. It's out there, and you can either be aware of it or not. And so, I think when you're talking about it in an educational way, it's not fear mongering at all, because it is out there.
Yeah, no, I love your expression, the salutation.
Yeah.
At the same time, it's fantastic.
Yeah.
Great. Okay, so look, we have some questions coming in from the social channels. We have one coming in saying, are hackers really targeting SMBs and mid-sized organizations on the dark web? Or are they going for bigger companies?
Yeah, and I kind of mentioned that on the slide deck. So really, is this dentist office in London being targeted? Probably not. But what's happening is every small business is getting wrapped up in every one of these breaches on third-party websites, which makes you part of the target audience, right? And because we see them specifically asking for curated lists of small businesses. You know why small businesses? Because small businesses don't have multi-factor authentication in place. They go to the easiest places. And so they can get a bunch of small businesses, and depending on the business, we get one to many. You get a small law firm that may be small in the standards of like what we consider small versus large law firms, but a small law firm could have 50 clients that are mid-sized organizations. It could be a great target, for a hacker. So you are a target by proxy, and that's the issue. You're getting wrapped up in every one of these breaches that occurs, and then you're getting curated into these smaller lists that MSPs are going. You think about it like a house. Look, multi-factor authentication is not the end-all be-all. Neither is an alarm in your house.
Better to have it than not have it.
Better to have it, right? You still put that sign in front of your house saying, I have an alarm, because not that you want them to go to your neighbor's house, but you want them to move on. You know what I mean? And it's the same concept with multi-factor authentication. You have to make it harder.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I think one thing that's come to light, obviously, in light of everything that's happened over the last kind of 10 to 12 weeks, especially in the SMB side of things, where a lot of them thought, I've got antivirus and that's enough to keep my business protected, or, it won't happen to me. Why would somebody want to target an SMB? And I think now with the increase in phishing emails and ransomware attacks, they're now beginning to actually realize that they are going to be attacked. It is going to happen to them, and they need to have extra security protection.
Yep. No, exactly.
Well, what about as a result of COVID-19 itself, Matt? Have you seen an increase in phishing emails and attacks?
Yeah. So, it's not that we've seen like this increase. All of a sudden, there's like 40% more phishing emails. Yeah. All they've done is just completely shift. It's crazy. They've shifted their business model around COVID-19. Right. So I showed, the examples, example after example, and those are like really, those are pretty sophisticated phishing emails that they're putting together. So it's just that they've shifted completely to COVID-19. Again, when the government reliefs were coming out across the world, they shifted, they created websites around that. And that's why it's so important to be in front of your customers talking about this type of stuff, because they're just going to get hammered with this type of things. And then you need to make sure the employees are aware.
Yeah, yeah. And actually on that point, how important do you think cybersecurity awareness training is now for employees, especially as a lot of them are now obviously working remotely, and a lot of them have no idea how to recognize a phishing email or a ransomware attack? You know, and a lot of companies are now saying that actually people are the biggest risk in your organization, not the cyber criminals, because they're just not educated on how to identify these attacks.
Yeah, so I think we sometimes, and even myself, we take for granted, you know, I'm in this every day. I'm seeing these phishing campaigns and things like that. So like to me, it's like, wait, you don't know that there's these things going on, but because you forget that they're not reading breach news every day. They're not reading security stuff. That's not their business particularly. So it's important to remember that even as an MSP, you are reading a lot more about this than they are probably. So they might not even be aware of these COVID-19 phishing emails. You know, and when you get to the security awareness training part, I mean, that should have been part of, I would say, an MSP stack already and being incorporated, but I do understand they get pushback from customers. And so I don't think that customers can push back like that anymore. And you know, in the States, a lot of MSPs have adapted what we call a decline of service. And I know I've talked to a lot of our partners in Europe, and they've been a little hesitant. There's some that have done it, where it's like, hey, we've talked to you about this enough times now. We've educated you. You still won't let us roll this out. We do need you to sign this, right? Sign this form saying you've been told about dark web monitoring or security awareness training, and you're acknowledging that you don't want to move forward with it. One, a lot of people don't like signing decline of service, so it might actually elevate how serious they think now how serious it starts to feel to them. But really, I mean, God, you have to use the remote workforce as an excuse to make them do this. I do believe, I mean, you're the expert. You guys are guiding them through this right now. A lot of them have no idea what they're doing with this remote workforce. So it does empower you as an MSP, and I think you have to be the voice of the subject matter expert and say, I'm telling you guys, this is my professional opinion. You must roll this out. I just think you have to take that I think you have to be confident with this stuff, and you really do have to have some kind of baseline. You know, I mean, we just rolled out stuff specifically around remote work training. Like, how can they not be taking trainings on that stuff right now, because they don't know the ramifications of using their personal computers?
Yeah, no, we hear a lot of that. And actually, I know me and you discussed before about the signing the letter of decline, and we did actually implement that with some partners who were actually part of this program, and some of them are probably watching today. And although they were a little hesitant in the UK to do it, actually after they did it, what they found was that the customers did actually sign up, because they didn't want to put their signature on it to say, okay, if something happens now in my organization, I'm at fault. So it actually encouraged the sales cycle to actually happen quicker when they did implement that letter of decline. So I'm a big believer in it as well. So anyone who hasn't used it, it's definitely well worth you putting it into place in your sales process.
Yeah, and it's also, it raised the awareness. It's not just a money grab, and I would articulate, it's not a money grab, but there's a huge revenue opportunity. I'm not going to ignore that part.
Yeah,
but it's also just this idea of
well though.
Yeah, but also your customers think they're getting all of these services. And you guys know that. I don't have to tell you. They think they're getting every piece of security, but they're not, because they're not willing to pay for it. They haven't been willing to pay for a lot of it. We had an MSP roll that decline of service. He actually heard me speak at an event, and he's like, he went back to his team. They were monitoring, I think, 10 customers. Now, this is a large MSP. They went from monitoring 10 customers. They rolled out the decline of service to over 215 of their customers. I mean, we're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars of revenue.
Wow.
But also, more importantly, I mean, you're now protecting your customers too. And as those credentials come in, every one of them, I mean, look, not everyone is as important as the other, but as those compromises come in, it's another piece of education. It's an opportunity to talk to your customer about something else. Be like, look, you just got exposed. This is why we should have been having DNS filtering, because your employees are using their work emails on websites that we have no idea. And so it just leads to a bunch of other conversations.
Hmm. And I guess, Matt, I mean, you work with obviously a lot of MSPs globally as well. The MSP industry itself has also been heavily targeted by cyber criminals. So have you seen an uptick in the actual MSPs themselves getting better security training so that they can protect their own business as well as their customers?
Yeah, so we actually are starting to see that finally, really, the MSPs starting to roll out the training to their own customers, or I mean, to their own employees. Yeah, their own employees. And even with the multi-factor, instituting it first internally. I mean, I've had more conversations, and I'm not an expert. ID Agent does have multi-factor authentication through Passly, but I am not an expert in that area, but I've gotten more questions about like our 2FA program than ever before with single sign-on, because MSPs are they realize that they can't have these conversations if they're not implementing it themselves. They have to start rolling those programs out to themselves, because it is. I'm sure it's a question you're going to get from your customers.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess average for an MSP where you have more and more businesses today who are really totally reliant on a managed service provider and actually seeing it as a really essential part of a business strategy now. If that MSP itself got hit with a cybersecurity attack, it could put them out of business.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, we saw an MSP, God, I can't remember what state it was out of. It was on my slide. I mean, they got hit with ransomware, and within a couple of weeks, 70% of their clients were gone. Unfortunately, I believe they did go out of business. I mean, it's very hard to recover from that because it's a trust business.
Service, isn't it?
Yeah, and and this isn't necessarily. Yeah, this is kind of off topic slightly. Well, not completely. I guess another thing, and I understand MSPs are obviously looking to reduce their costs, right? Yeah. One thing I would articulate, because you guys have given me this platform to talk about this, I think, is be careful and be really smart about which services you're cutting, because I'll give you examples. Like we're talking about security, right? If all of a sudden you say to your customers you're not offering security awareness training or phishing simulations or whatever, or these other security services, if you take that off the plate and then 3 months from now you're then going to tell them how important it is, it's going to be a very hard conversation, because you've been telling them for 6 months how important this stuff is. Then for the next 3 months, you're kind of saying, well, we're not really offering that now. And then 3 months from now, you're going to tell them how important it is. So just be very, strategic about where you're reducing your costs. And I think you have to be a little forward thinking about, what services you're going to cut from your stack.
Yeah, and actually talking about that, Matt, we have a question that's come in here. I'm not sure if you're going to be able to answer, but we'll give it a try. The question here is saying, given that MSPs need to build up their services before generating revenue, do you have any tips about managing cash flow between developing the service and selling it?
Let's see. Any tips on managing the cash flow and developing the service and selling it? I mean,
I think it's back to this thing we were talking about it on a previous session, that sometimes being an MSP is a get rich slowly scheme rather than a get rich quickly scheme, because you build the services, you get a little bit of revenue at the start, and then it builds and builds and builds and builds until you get to that point where actually over a 2-3 year period it becomes a really predictable and profitable business and a good business model. But the cash flow part of it initially generally always takes a bit of a hit. Okay,
so so I appreciate you kind of walking me through that a little bit more, because I think it gave me time to think about it a little. So I don't know that I don't think this applies across everything in your stack. There's certain products that obviously can be revenue generating much faster. I think the thing I would articulate on this call here is that one of the fastest ways to generate revenue is to really partner with your vendors. And I know that sounds so self-serving, but it is the truth. I mean, I know we put out a lot of stuff. I know some of the other vendors you guys have got coming on here, Tech Data. We put so much money and resources into like sales enablement materials. So all of the marketing collateral is already done for you. All you have to do is stamp your logo on it. We have a program called Goal Assist where we'll actually get on webinars with you. Like I it's not always me. We have a team, but I did a webinar with a guy the other day. We come on, we do. It can be as little or as much of the webinar of us doing it. You can come on as ID Agent. You can come on as an extension of your team. I shot video segments with a partner where we were just doing like 3-minute conversations, like you're kind of asking me these questions, answering them, and they're putting them out on LinkedIn. So I would say that doesn't necessarily manage your cash flow. Although if you get the revenue quickly from these webinars, I mean, we had a partner. We did a dark web monitoring webinar, and before the end of the call, they had 5 paying customers for it paid for their entire partnership with us. So I guess that would manage your cash flow because you would already be profitable. So I think taking advantage of your partners, your vendor partners, is a huge help with that in terms of efficiency of getting these programs rolled out much faster with training and things like that.
Yeah, no, I agree. And actually, as part of Practice Builder Live, one of the things we'll share with partners at the end of today's session is, Practice Builder Live is initially about helping partners to, generate more revenue, recurring revenue into their business, driving predictable and profitable growth, but also building out successful practices in security and cloud and IoT. So again, there's a lot of free resources there that partners will be able to benefit from. So I think you're right, manage your cash flow by taking the freebies that are out there, the support, the education, the training, the help to jump on customer calls with you. I think that's a really good way to manage that cost so that you can then focus on growing your pipeline.
Absolutely.
And Matt, just on those customer calls, because I think it is great the way you jump on calls with some of the MSPs to speak to their customers. What are the greatest objections that you hear from the end user?
So I'm obviously all related to what we do because there's the objections I'm hearing. So it's really funny when they show the live data report. It's the weirdest thing. Everybody does this too. It could be 35 credential exposures. They will skip over 30 active employees data that's there, and they'll go to the 5 employees who don't work there anymore, and they will say, "Why do I care about their data? They've not been at our company for 3 years." It happens almost every time, and so we developed one. We have a sheet, an actual like marketing slick where you can actually walk through this objection. But what people fail to realize again is that this employee. Well, the question is, you gotta start asking questions. Well, who was this employee? What did they have access to? What was their role? And did you actually shut off everything other than an Active Directory? And unfortunately, the answer is not usually other things, right? They didn't have an offboarding policy. And there's a couple examples, but this one recently was pretty crazy. The person hadn't been there in 3 years. They had a new office manager. She saw the report. She's like, I recognize that password. And it was on a Post-it note somewhere that she's found. The employee hadn't been there in 3 years, this other office manager. Meanwhile, this password is the active password to every one of the company's bank accounts. Okay. It had access. One of the bank accounts had over $1 million in cash in it.
Wow.
This password was sitting there. Now, luckily, no one had done anything with it at the time. But I mean, the second that the company then put those things together, well, guess what happened? The MSP was then able to roll out new policies around onboarding and offboarding, which empowers them so much more to then have these conversations. Yeah. We had one from, again, it was almost the same kind of concept. 3 years hadn't been there, and the password found was we were able to get into their like accounts receivable platform, their tax. We were able to get into their CRM system. So again, think about the damage you could do through a CRM system. You just got access to every customer and prospect of that MSP or that client. I mean, a single email sending like disparaging remarks to every client would do so much reputational damage. Because even if you're able to quickly tell them, hey, that wasn't us, be like, yeah, but somebody got into your system and sent this out. You're our security people, So that's where those old passwords come back to haunt a lot of people, and they just have that is the number one objection people hear.
Wow. I can just imagine some MSPs who are on today's call going, God, that's me, I haven't done it.
Yeah.
It is true, that with end users, as soon as anything goes wrong and they're working with an MSP, they automatically blame the MSP and everything is their fault. So I think the more you can consider putting the onboarding and the offboarding plans in place, the more secure, obviously, you're going to keep your customers, but also yourself and your reputation as well.
Absolutely.
So Matt, what do you see as the key growth areas in 2020 for MSPs?
It's impossible for me not to say security. But I mean that's a truthful statement. I think anybody on this call would agree. Again, compliance and security go pretty close to each other. I think look, right? GDPR is it's already been a part of the conversation, but the combination of both, and then remote. I mean, that's the new frontier, right? I mean, there's all this stuff, and there's things that we haven't thought of. You're right. I mentioned, I'm not saying streaming as a service is the next, like land grab, but I mean, again, who would have thought gyms and churches, and there's other industries that are going to be completely reliant now, because who knows what the gym experience is moving forward. And you think about, like, maybe there's a whole host of people who never wanted to step into a gym. They don't feel comfortable. Before COVID-19. Well, this is a whole new revenue stream for a gym that they had never even thought about. So but yeah, the big ones, obviously security, compliance, and the remote work environment, I think, are the three right now that are going to be the other thing. Co-managed IT is something, and I know Rob will probably talk about. Me and Rob have been on like 4 panels together recently. So I won't completely step on his topics, but we've been talking about it too. What an opportunity, right? I mean, you've got these larger organizations who, in some cases, might be reducing their IT staff and don't have the capabilities. They already don't have the capabilities in many cases to do all the change from remote. They were not set up for that environment at all. So what a great opportunity. And I think the other tip I would give to smaller MSPs out there, because we've been hearing this from our customer base, think about teaming up with a larger MSP. Because what's happening right now is there's large MSPs that are getting inquiries from prospects that don't fit their normal minimum requirements for taking on. And they might just not want to take them on, but they could pass them to you as a referral. And so that is something smaller MSPs are really pushing towards right now, because it's a great, I mean, you pay them I think the first month's MRR, and you've been introduced, and you start getting a whole new prospect list from a larger MSP that you're not even competing with really in your region potentially.
Yeah, no, that's a really good idea. And actually something I've seen some of the smaller MSPs do as well, especially because of their remote working, is they're diversifying their solution set. So a lot of them aren't just offering managed services now, they're starting to offer office furniture. And they're starting to do things like remote working in a box, where they've noticed that where you've employees that have just been sent home to work, they've just got a kitchen table, they've just got a kitchen chair and a laptop, and that's their office effectively. But they've realized that that's not good enough for them to continue with that. So they're now supplying proper chairs, proper tables, full equipment, 2 monitors, and actually just expanding their portfolio so that they can provide better remote working solutions. Have you seen that with MSPs you've worked with as well?
Yeah, I mean, we're starting to see them, and we're really starting to see a lot more content around that. I mean, I have I had a good webcam before this, but like I'm already looking to invest in like way higher definition, and I think you're going to start to see that. So like, I'm not saying you have to be an expert in this, but you could put a piece of collateral together talking about like, do you want to take your videos to the next level? Because all your everybody's doing this stuff now. It's and even if we go back, it's still going to change how everybody does business in general, and people are going to start putting themselves out there a lot more. MSPs who hadn't done it previously, that's one thing I would tell MSPs, like, if you're not putting yourself out there right now, and I understand there's a lot of noise, there's a lot of events, there's a lot of virtual things, but you can't let other MSPs be the voice that your network is hearing from right now, because they are hearing from them, because everybody's out there. But what a great opportunity also, if you're not normally comfortable doing this, the world is really forgiving right now. I've made this joke. So if people have heard this, I apologize. But like, I don't have kids or a dog, but if my kid or dog just showed up in this call right now, we would sort of just laugh about it. It wouldn't be a thing. But 6 months ago, it would have been like, why is your kid in this? This is very unprofessional, But now it's humanizing people. So it's an opportunity to humanize yourself and be in front of your customers in a different way, and really be in front of your network in a totally different way.
Yeah, no, definitely. And it's funny, I did a session with partners recently about how to deliver videos, and I was explaining to them that, it doesn't have to be the perfect polished video. You can be taking your dog for a walk, just get your phone, do a video and make sure that you're getting the content and staying out there in front of your customers. And actually a lot of them started doing it, and afterwards they said, actually, it's not as bad as what we thought. And it means they're getting out there, because some partners, some MSPs today, they've taken their foot off the marketing pedal. thinking that, oh, there's no point in marketing today. But actually the ones who are consistent and the ones who are staying out there, when this whole wildfire calms, I think they will be the ones to win more business off the back of it, because they'll have been the face, they'll have been there when customers needed them most. Do you think you agree, or you think the same? No,
I agree. I mean, I think you have to, because, I mean, look, I don't want to sugarcoat it. Like, there's going to be MSPs that don't survive, right? Like, that's just being real. So there's going to be customers looking for new MSPs. I mean, we had actually one of our going back to that dental example, we had an MSP who picked up a dental client because the MSP that was serving that dental client unfortunately did go out of business, and so they needed to reach out elsewhere. So, you know, you have to be marketing right now. I mean, we just attended Robin's boot camp, and I mean, of course, everybody there is really pushing for sales and marketing. But you know, the idea is, I mean, of course, they're saying, you know, you should be doubling your marketing right now, right?
Yeah, exactly. I agree.
I mean, you should be signing up for people who sales expert like Fiona. Yeah.
Oh, well, look, on that note, we've actually run out of time. I'd love to stay on chatting with you as usual. But look, thank you so much. We are going to put up the links of where everyone can access your free resources. And again, thank you so much for actually putting those resources together for partners. So thank you to Matt Solomon. You can stay on and join us if you want, Matt, or you can jump off to your next session. And thank you to all of the partners who sent in questions for Matt, and I hope you find that session very valuable. So we're now ready to move on to our second afternoon sessions, where we have Joel Shimondes and Simon Kitson, who are the VP and General Manager of Maverick AV Solutions, which are actually part of the Tech Data Group. So hi, Joel. Hi, Simon.
Hi, Fiona. Good afternoon.
Hello. Hi, Joel. Can I hear you? Are you there? Oh, I can't hear Joel for some reason, Simon. I can only hear you.
Oh, okay. I think
So,
he might need to pull his microphone down on his headset. So
that's fine, no problem. We'll sort it out.
You've got me now?
Hey,
yeah.
There we go. Technical error. Sorry. How are you doing, Fiona?
I'm very good, thank you. How are you?
Really good. Listening to the last speaker, actually, was really some really good information in there as well. So really helpful.
Yeah, he's awesome, and it ties in nicely actually to your presentation. So you'll be pleased to hear we have had over 2,500 views already, guys. So you have a lovely audience to present to today. But what I wanted to just point out in today's session for the partners is, you know, over the last 10, 12 weeks, we have been working relentlessly to get customers set up with remote working and to make sure they have really solid collaboration strategies. So actually your session is incredibly timely, because most of the partners on this call have already been doing this for the last 10 to 12 weeks, but they're also planning to do more as we go into the future. So you guys are, you know, specialists in this industry, you're specialists in communications and collaboration equipment. What have you seen that's on the increase as a result of COVID-19?
I'll take that one to begin with, Fiona. And you know, once again, thanks for having us today. Really great to be here. I think the number one thing, and it's something that we've been saying for years, actually in our own meetings, both with our vendors and our customers, is turn your camera on. And we've seen that with remote working, the usage of video has increased hugely. And it used to be that something like, according to research, something like 54% of meetings had a remote participant. And now, obviously, it's 100%. Yeah. And the number of remote meetings has exploded as well. There's been some amazing statistics come out from the market. So sort of walking them up in order: 100 million for Google, 200 million for Microsoft Teams, and 300 million for Zoom of daily meeting minutes. It's just phenomenal numbers. And obviously, as people can't meet face to face, there's a much greater need to collaborate and to make quicker decisions. So we're seeing a bigger use of collaboration tools such as Microsoft Whiteboard. You know, it's a great piece of software that's part of O365, and people can ideate and they can make decisions very, very, very quickly. And I guess looking forward to the new normal, whatever that ultimately becomes, I do see genuine concern for employees' welfare, and I can see both desk spaces and meeting rooms being reutilised and recommissioned. And in fact, one of our end users the other day that we were talking to, or an end user company I was talking to, said they probably don't expect to bring back more than 50 or 60% of their staff permanently to the office, even after COVID has subsided. And that, I think, makes their meeting rooms even more important. And last bit on this, and then I think Joel has something to add. But the slide here talks about digital transformation, and I read a brilliant article on LinkedIn yesterday that really hit home to me. And the author called it the 3 phases of digitization. Number 1 was digital evolution. And that's the gradual development of something measured perhaps in decades. So, the gradual evolution over time from analog to digital technology. Then there's digital transformation, which is on my slide there, which is, by his definition, a process by which one figure, expression, or function is converted into another one of similar value. And that's measured in years. But then I love this bit. He said, actually, what we're going through now is a digital revolution. And it's a dramatic and wide-reaching change in conditions or attitudes or ways of operating. And that's measured in months, not years and not decades. And there never really was a digital revolution until now. And I think there was evolution and a bit of transformation happening. But since the virus has hit, I think we now have a real digital revolution.
Yeah, no, I'd agree. Joel, what's your thoughts on it?
Yeah, to extend that as well, a partner of ours said to me a few weeks ago that they've seen the adoption of collaboration solutions accelerate more in the last 8 weeks than they've seen in the last 8 years. And I'm sure that everybody who's listening to this has experienced that as well, right? So Zoom has now become part of our natural language, even if it's not a Zoom, we're using other types of technologies. So I think that how video is now just natural for us, and it has advantages and disadvantages to that, by the way. It can be very tiring if you spend all day on video, right? But mostly but mostly the benefits mostly have been absolutely fantastic about that as well. I think the other thing as well, just to extend the point that Simon was saying, is that we're also seeing now decisions being made in days rather than weeks or months on collaboration-based solutions. And we'll talk a bit more about that in a second as well. But that speed of decision-making now is faster than we've ever seen before in the industry.
And I think, from a sales perspective, obviously I'm a sales trainer. So, one of the big things that we see is that decision-making process that maybe could have taken 8 weeks is now taking 8 days. So the decisions are actually being made a lot faster, but that's because we have the urgency behind us to move people quickly into that remote working environment.
Completely. And if you think about that, when people start to return to work, and no matter what the country is, there's a phased approach to that, as we know. But even if you have 25% of your workforce back, or 30 or 40%, the need for meetings and driving the right collaboration solution to allow people inside the building to communicate, of course, with people outside the building is going to exist now for a very long time. And without being too melodramatic about this, the horrible situation we find ourselves in, it has changed the way that people work. And we won't go, I think the last speaker said it right, we're not going to go backwards, right? We're only going to go forwards now in how we communicate with people.
Yeah, no, I agree. So that brings us on to the actual market opportunity then. What are you guys now seeing as the market opportunities within the collaboration and meeting spaces for now and in the future?
Yeah, I think if you look at the total meeting room environment and opportunity, so worldwide, and I know it's a big number, but worldwide is like 250 meeting spaces worldwide, right? It's about 180 million huddle spaces worldwide. Now, out of that, less than 5% of those rooms have adequate conferencing capabilities. And I know we're talking millions here, but if you distill that down to a particular country or an area or a partner base or an end user base that people work with, you'll still find that this rings true. Most organizations do not have adequate conferencing facilities. And what do we mean by adequate? Adequate is the ability to walk in, have a conference, not spend 3 or 4 minutes with your mic muted like I did, making sure that the other person can hear you. It's about having a seamless conference quickly. So that opportunity is one around making sure the meeting room has that adequate conferencing capability. But the second one is really about making sure that user adoption is done in the right way to allow people to use it as quick and as fast as possible. Now, the last thing I'd say on that is that, again, just to reiterate a point, a lot of that has now been accelerated by our natural use of video platforms like Zoom or Teams in the home environment now as well.
But I think on the user adoption side there, we were just talking about it with Matt on the previous call as well. I mean, as a result of everybody having to quickly go into remote work, and even if they had Teams, what a lot of companies found that actually their staff had no idea how to use the Teams element of it. They had no idea how to even start it, how to run it. So there was a huge increase, and you guys probably seen it as well, a huge increase in like Teams training and video training so that they could actually figure out how to use it quickly.
Oh, most definitely, Fiona. I mean, and out of this isn't necessarily the right way to do it, but people have learned out of necessity. And when you learn out of necessity, you learn quickly, right?
Yeah.
And that's what we've seen happen in that's what we've seen happen in the market.
Yeah. Simon, have you anything on that?
No, I think that the biggest thing for me is just to reiterate that 5% of spaces. You know, people may look at that and say, well, hang on, our conference room's got a flat screen in there, or it's got a projector in there, or we've got a Cisco VC unit in the corner of the room, and in many cases that's fine, but there really are only very few that have the full suite of hardware and software that they need to run these meetings, these virtual meetings without any hiccups.
And on a second note, then, where are you guys seeing decisions being made to adopt more collaboration technologies? Is there particular verticals or industries that you're seeing?
Well, it's definitely a changing landscape about where the decisions are being made. And you know, if you look at a large enterprise, traditionally they would have a facilities manager, or possibly even an AV manager, an audiovisual manager. And whilst they might not necessarily make the final purchasing decision, they would have been, if you like, the trusted advisor to the CEO, and you know, order placing would have kind of been a formality, really. But now, I think because the platform is the first decision, it's becoming much more a CIO or a CTO led decision. Of course, the CEO may well still be involved from a budgetary perspective, but the CIO, CTO is more making the final call on the direction that they take. And as Joel referred to earlier, we're definitely seeing quicker decisions being made. And with the health and safety concerns about people coming back to the office, I would say that HR are becoming increasingly involved as well, to make sure that both the desk areas and the meeting room areas are adequate. And one other bit that I think is really important here, and we've heard this so many times in the last few weeks, is I think a lot of end users are going back to resellers who've helped them during the crisis. So the ones who got them up and running remotely when suddenly we're on lockdown in 5 days' time. You know, they're the guys now who are getting the calls to, oh, can you come and help me with my meeting rooms? They're the first port of call. And because of that, you're seeing perhaps less complicated tenders going out, less RFQs happening. People are just making those quicker decisions perhaps than they have done in the past.
Yeah, and I think the other thing there, and I'd love your opinion on this, but especially in bigger enterprise accounts, it has been a case in some cases where you have between maybe 5 and 8 different people involved in the decision-making process, because you have a lot of the IT department, you've line of business people getting involved. Do you see that reducing now because of the urgency? So less people are involved and the decisions are made quicker?
Most definitely, Fiona. I think that's exactly what's happened. Is that because the decisions need to be made quickly, therefore the decision makers are having to make those decisions quickly. But the other thing to bear in mind here is that those decisions, obviously stating the obvious, have to be a safe, reliable, compliant decision for the organization as well. I mean, when we talk about this, I think the thing that amazes me the most about this is how much this has changed in a short amount of time. Right, and you know, as previous before COVID, you know, and for the years in previously, these were almost islands of decision makers who had different motivations around why they wanted a collaboration strategy in their business. And of course there would be some crossover, but you would tend to find there was different motivations around it. Actually, now that motivation has come together very, very quickly to, as we said, to make those decisions quickly about deploying those solutions.
Yeah.
And actually, just on that, on the strategy part, Joel, what is the most significant decision that an organization has to make when they're considering that collaboration strategy?
Yeah, good question. You know, several years ago, this decision would have been focused around what solution looked the nicest in the boardroom, and I don't mean that disrespectfully, but that's what it was about, right? It was about AV solutions looking wonderful in the meeting room or the boardroom environment, and the functionality that it delivered. That changed, right? That process around collaboration and adoption of that changed in around 2016, when Microsoft came out with a solution called Microsoft Hub. And it was the first solution truly to be integrated into a platform play that allowed you to bring documents and videos and other content seamlessly into that in an interactive and a video capability. And what we saw there was really the birth of people, of end users, making decisions based on what their IT platform is, or what the platform they've standardized in their business, then what solutions then plug into that. Now, what we've seen, obviously, with the birth of Zoom as an example in the last couple of years, is that has become a platform in its own right. And of course, we'll see the functionality expand in Zoom over time as well, of what it can deliver. But still, now decisions are made on platforms, not on who's got the shiniest piece of glass, but what's your platform, what's your workflow, by the way, in a lot of enterprises. So what's your workflow throughout that platform? And then how does that workflow then get into the meeting room environment? If you take something like Microsoft Teams, which is a wonderful example of a platform that flows all the way from the beginning of basic user, SharePoint, access, very basic collaboration, but then goes all the way through complexity of workflow management, and you can bring that all the way then into the meeting room as well. You know, that is a fabulous and agile experience for an end user to be able to have that.
Yeah. And actually, when they make the decision on the platform, so let's say the very first part of the decision-making process is decide on the platform, what are the next major considerations they need to make after they've picked that platform of choice?
Another great question, Fiona, and yeah, I'll take that one. I think the next point really is how the meeting space is going to be used. So for a long time, we got, as an industry or meeting room industry, we got hung up on the size of the room, whether it was a huddle room, whether it was a conference room, whether it was this, that, or the other. And it's now much more important to just consider how the room is going to be used, rather than what the size of the room is, and then worry about the relevant technology backfill. So the way we position it is it's 3 core ways that you can start a video meeting, and that's join, bring, or select. And join is where you join a meeting from a lockdown platform environment, such as Teams, Zoom, or Google Meet. Bring is where you bring your own platform on your own compute device into the room. You're familiar with the tools and the interface. You don't have to worry about logging on to any in-room device, and you have easy access to your presentations and the files that you might want to share. Mm-hmm. And then finally, a select environment, and there are in this environment there are multiple platforms displayed in the room for the user to select from. I wanted, if it's okay, just to cover those in a little bit more detail and talk about some of the solutions that we have. So, if you firstly consider Join, the lockdown experience. So this is where an organisation has decided and standardised on a UC platform. The user walks into the room and quickly and simply joins the resident platform from the scheduled calendar appointment that's displayed in there. And from room to room, there might be different devices, but the display that you're connecting to or connecting to the meeting through will usually be will always be a common interface. So why would an organisation have or deploy a Join environment? Well, number one is security, because it's locked down to the platform. The IT admin can control everything on all the devices across their estate very easily. The entry price is pretty low for these sorts of solutions, and it's very, very easy to use. And within Maverick, we offer a range of solutions here covering all the main platforms like Teams and Zoom and Google, supplying products like the Logitech Tap. That's the touchscreen interface that sits on the table, and that drives a mini PC or a Chromebox that's hidden away behind the display. Yeah. And that PC interfaces with all the in-room audio and video as well. So it's a great user experience. And there's different options depending if you are in the huddle room or if you're in that larger conference room for 20 or more people. Okay. Then further on the Join side, if you want to use touchscreen ideation as well, like Joel referred to the Surface Hub, we have that solution, and then we've also aggregated some solutions with Avocor, a company that makes touchscreens, Logitech for the video and audio, and Zoom as the platform. Then perhaps moving on in a bit more detail to the Bring environment, this is where the AV is already installed in the room. And forgive me for keeping saying AV, it's years of working in AV, audio visual.
I think most of our partners will know that.
Yeah, no, you know how it is. Every single market segment has their own little acronyms, and conscious that I'm using too many.
Industry, we like acronyms.
We do indeed, we do. Yeah. So where the user brings their preferred platform to host the meeting. Well, you might ask, well, why is this relevant? Well, the recent survey suggests that 62% of organizations use 3 or more video conferencing platforms. And I know I often switch between platforms, and I have Zoom, Skype, Teams, all resident on my PC, and I'm jumping between each of those platforms as the day goes. This type of Bring solution gives the users choice. The cost is very reasonable, and there is no requirement for additional platform room licenses. The room remains secure because IT is still controlling the applications that can be installed on the laptop. So there's no security risks there. Couple of solutions that we have there: Barcode ClickShare Conference. Barcode ClickShare has been around for about 8 years now, and you may have seen it on your travels. It's a little wireless, a little button that plugs into your USB port and allows you to wirelessly share in a meeting. Now they've taken that a step further, and actually you can control the audio and video devices in the room as well as the display in the room, all through that single button. So you walk into the room with your laptop, you start the call, you plug in the Barcode ClickShare Conference button, press the button, and then everything lights up. The screen comes on, the camera turns on, and the audio starts, which is a great, simple to use solution. And then finally, the select environments. This is where the user would walk into an environment. There's multiple platforms already resident. And to be frank, technically, this can be quite challenging. But we're seeing quite a big demand from this for the reasons that I spoke about earlier. And a number of our vendors are starting to create products that deliver almost like an appliance-like environment, a bit like a smart TV where you can go to Netflix, you can go to Sky, you can go to your Virgin Media, and have lots of multiple platforms hosted in the same space. And we have a solution here using an interface called Quick Launch, a software interface. And that's a window into all of these multiple platforms. And depending on the platform, it schedules into the Exchange calendar, the Outlook calendar rather, or the Google calendar, whatever you're using. And I think the biggest development we've seen in the last 6 to 12 months is that the UC platform vendors are now starting to talk to one another, and they're sharing APIs. So interoperability is starting to become a lot easier and a lot better as well. And as an example, Microsoft have on their Microsoft Teams Rooms roadmap the capability to join a Zoom or a Cisco WebEx Teams meeting through the Microsoft Teams interface. And I think 5 years ago, that would never have happened.
Yeah. Suppose they're being forced to do it now, though, weren't they? Because we all have to start collaborating and working together in terms of vendors and systems as well.
Exactly. And I know that was a long answer, but it's a really important part of our positioning and our strategy as an organisation, and it's something we're encouraging our resellers to also use, join, bring, and select. It's quite an easy one to remember.
And do you see partners, and maybe Joel, you take this question, but do you see partners or MSPs starting to put together maybe remote working packages like the Join package, Bring or Select, and trying to put them together into maybe just like an SMB remote working package, a mid-market working package? Have you seen that?
I think we're going to see it. We're starting to see inquiries about how do you create it. I mean, if you think about what we said earlier on, Fiona, about that 95 and that 5%,
Yeah.
that 95% opportunity, that really requires you to have those type of packages that you're talking about in order to be able to scale that across that easily. What you don't want to have is proprietary packages for every meeting room you do, right? It just doesn't make sense to do that. So building out those packages so they're based on perhaps the organization. We see a lot of enterprises already that have adopted a catalog approach to meeting rooms where they say, this is my small meeting room and I need a join strategy, therefore it's this, or this is my I need a bring in a large meeting room, this is this. We see that approach happening more and more right now. Yeah,
and it's funny, we had, I'm not sure if you've seen Scott Riley on, he was from Cloud Nexus, he was our second speaker on today, and again, they specialise in selling cloud packages, but he was also saying about how partners are putting together different packages rather than doing individual quotes for everyone.
Exactly.
Consuming, and there's too many options, you give people too many options, then they get confused. So again, in that space, they've seen a big increase in partners putting together those packages.
And also coming back to a well-trodden path we've already said, but that speed of decision making is much easier when you've already got the packages predefined and you either have this one for this room, this one for this room, this one for this room. Absolutely. Yeah,
perfect. And look, you guys are very, very close to this on a daily basis. What other key kind of focus areas are you seeing now as an impact of COVID-19?
I think the other biggest one that we're seeing right now is around corporate communications. So as people return to the working environment or education, the ability to now have messaging that's agile around the building for people in a digital format is huge. Previously, we've all seen digital signage solutions and great signage solutions in office environments. In a lot of cases, depending on the environment, they were a nice to have rather than a mandatory. They were showing some sales stats, or they were showing some, employee of the day or whatever it may be, right, in that messaging. This is going to change now completely. If you think about how people now will be moving around that office space, For instance, there's some discussions going on right now about only being able to have 3 people in a meeting room environment, by the way. And then how do you audit that, and how do you take a look at that to make sure that's happening, and how do you message whether that's happening or not? If you also think about people needed to go into a canteen or to go into a bathroom, you have to limit the amount of people that's going in there. If you think about that as a solution, that means that you need signage for the messaging, stop, go, wait, whatever it may be. But you also need IoT and analytics to be able to do your people counting of what's going on in that environment. So we're seeing a huge interest now in corporate communication solutions, but also around that IoT and analytics as people start to get back to work as well.
Yeah.
And what I would say about that, by the way, in order to deploy those solutions, an IoT and analytics solutions, the skills around that are very different to what it takes to put a display on a wall and have some digital signage to it, right? So that intelligence around IT integration and how you manage that and how you treat it as a service as well, you run it as a service, should be very interesting for MSPs as well.
Yeah, I think so. And I think the other thing we're seeing happen a lot in the marketplace, Joel, is partners are diversifying their portfolio. So when it comes to remote working solutions, it's not just the laptop or the collapsing comms, it's also the desktop, it's the chair, the desk. Have they got the right equipment now to actually work from home but work safely? Are you seeing that happen with a lot of the partners that you're working with as well, where they're now even doing things like office furniture but in homes?
Yeah, we see that, and Simon alluded to it earlier on. We saw when COVID was starting that a number of the end users went to their normal suppliers to be able to get the solutions that they needed, because they didn't have time to go out to new markets in order to be able to get that. So they've asked more of their typical suppliers to their businesses already. Can you do more for us, right? And whether that's and some of that absolutely was outside of the normal spectrum of what that business may deliver. And we certainly saw that in collaboration. By the way, we saw that end users were going back to their reseller base and asking them, can you help us with collaboration and quickly? And to a lot of guys, that was new territory. And so by the way, I think that's going to continue, right, as a trend. End users do not have the time to go out looking for multiple new sources of solutions for them. It's about who they can rely on, who they work with already, to expand what they do into that end user. And sorry to use a cliche, but it is really about that trusted advisor from the partner to the end user as well, being able to provide that.
Yeah, no, I think MSPs have to be more, and our partners need to be more than just IT suppliers or managed service providers now. They need to be the business advisor, the trusted advisor that guides them on what total solutions they need to put in place, including things like the office furniture rather than just the technology part of it. Well,
and one other point to that as well, if I may, is about once you've deployed the technology, it's about the user adoption of that technology. Now, we're fortunate, as we said, that videos become a lot more natural for us, so that's going to help accelerate that. But having the right user adoption policies, the right user adoption training sessions, all of those things, the support mechanism is huge, is absolutely huge. Anyone who's been involved in collaboration previously can tell you stories about how they may have sold 100 meeting rooms or 100 collaboration units to a business, but only 50 of them were deployed and another 50 sat in the cupboard because the right user adoption policies weren't done. And again, that's exactly what's needed as we move forward. Yeah, and it's another revenue stream as well, I think, for MSPs to add on that training and add on that as an added service to any of the equipment that they're selling. Absolutely, of course, and that helps build the stack, right? Completely and utterly.
Yeah, definitely.
I think as well, just one other thing to throw in there maybe is from because we're all getting used to using video from home, like I think all three of us are at this point. When we do go back into the office, I can see a big opportunity at the desk as well for video collaboration. So it won't just be in a meeting room. I think there will be a lot more personal devices deployed at the desk as well.
Most definitely.
Yeah, okay. So look, and one of the reasons I asked you to come on to today's session is obviously, you know, every partner in the world today needs to be equipped and have the right skills and have the right knowledge to basically have bigger business conversations around collaboration and virtual meeting spaces. But not necessarily do all of them actually have the right skills, and they might not have the right support or know what equipment they should even be putting in there. So I asked you guys on because, you know, Maverick, a lot of people don't know Maverick's part of Tech Data, but I wanted you guys to come on because you're really the specialist and the experts within this field. So could you tell the partners a little bit about where does Maverick sit in the Tech Data organization, but also then just share with us what additional services maybe you guys can offer to partners if they're not experienced in this space themselves, but they still want to be able to sell into it. So how can you help them?
Perfect. I'll take the Maverick question, and Simon, I'll let you take the services one. But
Sure.
but Fiona, you described Maverick perfectly already, so I don't know if I need to. I mean, Maverick, as Fiona has said, our business is a specialist part of Tech Data, focusing on smart meeting and smart signage solutions. We have expertise in 15 countries in Europe, and we work really closely, of course, with our great Tech Data counterparts in the different divisions throughout Tech Data. You can see on the screen here the solutions around the left-hand side of what we do, and then how we then take those to market in terms of the type of solutions that we provide. And you can see at the bottom of here really what our focus areas are, as I said, that smart meetings focus, our smart signage focus, but also how do we work with our partners to be able to deploy solutions across multinational countries as well. The other part of the solution that is key moving forward, and I think this is really important for what we're talking about, is that the solutions, as I think we've already alluded to, have expanded beyond collaboration or signage solutions now, because there is a need now to make sure that you have IoT analytics, the right security in place, the right cloud capabilities as well, to make sure that that's available and as part of the solution that's taken to market around collaboration. And we're delighted that we work with our Tech Data counterparts on being able to take that expertise and take it to market, and also to be able to provide that thought leadership, that knowledge, those services, which Simon can cover in a second, to the partner base to help them in those environments.
Yeah. Thanks, Joel. I mean, from a services perspective, I mean, we have a full range of support services available, either as you put it, Fiona, to somebody who's new to the collaboration world, or if you have some experience in there as an additional resource if your engineers are busy, or let's say you need further support with pan-EU or global deployments. I mean, we never want to be seen as a threat to your own services support. This is just additional resource for you to call on as and when you need it, really. At the most basic level, we've got logistics capabilities of bundling, configuring, dispatching full solutions to multiple locations, all the way up to full day on-site installation, network integration and deployment, and end user training of some of our solutions. And pick out a couple that I think might be of interest to the audience here. One of our most popular is a network readiness assessment, and this is done virtually by one of our engineering teams, who works with the IT admin of the end user to check their network for the suitability of a rollout for Teams rooms, for example. And what they do is they talk through with that end user how it's set up, which version of SQL they might be using in their back office, and they supply a report with recommendations for any necessary upgrades and software versions, just really to ensure a smooth deployment when the installation comes about. We offer remote deployment services for meeting rooms, and those engineers teach the end user IT team how to set something up successfully, rather than them having to pay 10 times for it. You know, they'll do it once or twice with an IT admin. Give them a list of the training documentation so they can do it themselves for other rooms or facilities. And one last one maybe to highlight, particularly because it's free, is we have a security assessment service as well. And lots more AV devices are now being added to a corporate network, but a massive proportion of them still have the vendor's default password setting. And for us to work with our security advisors and the end user, we'll produce a report of all of the potential flaws in their network, and clearly we'd offer them the options as well to improve it. And I don't understand why our guys aren't saying, why are we doing this for free? We're so busy. We should be selling this hundreds of times every day. It's a great free service.
And where do partners access that?
So go on, Joel. Yeah.
No. So each they can access it, Fiona, via any of our Maverick teams and the Tech Data teams locally. So the Maverick teams locally can support them on that, and provide them with the PDFs and the link to the assessment as well. And also, Fiona will share the links with the audience as well of that material afterwards.
Perfect. Okay. Well, look, guys, we're down to our last 5 minutes. It flies through when you're on here, doesn't it?
It certainly does.
Before we pass over to the next speaker, I'm just going to ask you a few questions, if that's okay.
Yeah, easy ones, please.
Easy ones. Well, they're in from the audience, so let's read it out to you. So it's actually a question for you, Joel. They picked on you.
Okay.
So it says, with remote working home bandwidth, with it becoming an issue for some, are there any platforms that are better for where people have constrained bandwidth, especially if they're working over home with poor Wi-Fi connection?
Wow. If you've seen any of the adverts on television selling platforms at the moment, you would assume there isn't any problems at home with home bandwidths because all the video looks broadcast quality and fantastic. But of course, we know that's not true. What I would say is, and I do mean this, all of the main platforms really are as good as each other now. And I mean good, by the way. The technology has advanced so much in that reducing jitter and reducing packet loss. To be able to give good quality, and so while there's a whole load of standards around collaboration set by the ITU, each of the platform vendors have their own. So you have basic communication of ITU standards, but then they've got their own ways in the background of tweaking that quality.
Yeah.
The question about Wi-Fi and home Wi-Fi, I mean, is if there's anything that's really, there's two things that are really susceptible to bad Wi-Fi at home. One is gaming, and then the other is obviously video collaboration. And you've got to have the best possible experience at home as you can get. You'll notice that a lot of the telecoms vendors are now talking about Wi-Fi mesh solutions at home to give you bigger coverage. You know, my house, as an example, has got very, very thick walls, and I can't run Wi-Fi. I can't run video adequately over Wi-Fi because of where the router is. I have to do it wired through the house currently as well until I get a mesh installed.
Yeah, it is a challenge today. I mean, even for me to run today, I couldn't run this in my house because my Wi-Fi is so bad, because I live in a very rural area. So the Wi-Fi was just so poor, I couldn't do it. So I've actually had to come into one of our partners' offices who has a 200 meg line so that we can actually stream this today.
But I think the ability to send collaboration over small bandwidths, as long as the ability to reduce jitter and latency is in place, is good. So you don't need big, huge bandwidths anymore for it. You just need a reliable connection. That's the key thing.
Yeah, perfect. So look, one last question for you is, who do you think is going to win the collaboration platform battle?
Ooh.
You can only pick one. You can only pick one.
But I can't. And I'll tell you why. And I won't, because I'll get in trouble if I say what I think in terms of where they sit. But what I would say is, by the way, is that all of the platforms that we've talked about previously have very set places where they play very strongly in. Okay, so you know, whether if you want a complete workflow experience, then it's something like Microsoft Teams, or Google can do that in their own platform, and Google has got some really interesting cases where they're doing it. Zoom have a place as well. Cisco have a place, of course, with a very dedicated base of customers. So I honestly, I think in the same way in our social environment, we have LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or whatever other, TikTok, what other platforms I don't know about that the children are using. I think that there are multiple platforms now in the working environment that we just learn to use.
That was a very diplomatic answer, Joel.
Thank you, Fiona. Thank you.
Yeah, well, he's going to move on to be a politician next, I think, Fiona.
It's not endless with insults, right? It's been great so far. So.
I think perhaps a little bit by vertical as well. There could be a difference. That would be the only thing I'd add. I think Google, for example, has proved itself very, very capable and very, very popular in education with Google Classroom. And yeah, I mean, so many people have an Office 365 capability now. Something like 70% of enterprises or possibly more have Microsoft anyway. So, you know, why wouldn't they embrace and use Teams? I mean, they may add other video platforms on top of that purely for video, but yeah, I mean, Microsoft and Google as the whole workflow piece are definitely leading the way.
Yeah, they own the world.
Yeah.
Okay, well, guys, thank you so much.
No, thank you.
Unfortunately run out of time, but we will make sure that we send out your contact details, your follow-up details to everybody on today's call. So thank you for joining, and thanks for keeping all the businesses up and running.
Thanks, Fiona. No, enjoy the rest of your afternoon as well. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, thanks everyone. Bye.
I'm afraid. No, you're back. Sorry, Fiona, I was about to take over for you. I'll let you get on.
Hi there. So we have Rob and can we have Rob and Rick, please? Hey, there they are. Hi. Can you both hear me okay?
We can now.
Can now, yes.
Did I lose audio for a minute?
Just for a bit.
Oh, well, I'm back. That's the main thing. So look, guys, thank you so much for joining us today. So Rob, I know you and Rick know each other very well, and Rick has been my standby today in case anything technically went wrong. And when he heard you were on the show, he was dying to come on to ask me some more questions. So first of all, Rob, I'll let you introduce yourself to the partners. I know you've been in the MSP industry for over 20 years and what seems like a lifetime that you've been in the industry. So tell us about you and why you're in the MSP industry.
Yeah, absolutely. And first of all, super honored to be here with you guys. I'm very, very happy that we have the ability to still communicate with each other this way, even though sometimes our audio kicks out, which, by the way, tells me that this is not the future of events, that we actually will be back at events live at some point in time. So, yeah, I know. At least that's what I'm hoping for. So my name is Rob Ray. I'm Senior Vice President of Business Development with Datto. Business development for us, basically what my role is ultimately I own the community. I own the growth of our managed service providers, the strategy that we have, the communication that we have, and in essence, making sure that our partners have the tools, and everything else that goes along with helping build managed service provider practices. The cool part about it is that my organization is an MSP only vendor. We don't have direct sales. We don't have even sales to VARs or resellers. We're traditionally focused on managed service providers. So in essence, I own the go-to-market strategy for the business. You mentioned 20 years. It's been a long time. I actually spent my time in finance for the first 12 years because my British grandparents thought being in banking was the best job ever. So first 12 years wasted in finance before I realized you're never going to make any money in banking. So I got out of that and then jumped into, I found IT and started with a computer company that you guys might call Compact Computers way back in the day. Ran inside sales up in Canada for a number of years with them through the HP acquisition, selling hardware, B2B. What happened was back then, it was tough. Hardware, everybody's talking about the death of hardware, and sure, we've seen some decline, but I don't think it's died. 20 years later, we're still slugging hardware. But there was this new kind of transition that happened, and what was happening as a result of the .com bust, which was towards services, things that we used to give away for free, we're now charging for, and then it flip-flopped and kind of giving hardware away at minimal or single-digit margins and focused on services. So I wanted to get out of the hardware gig and into kind of what was next. And that's the cool thing about IT. There's always something next, right? And that's where I found managed services. Like, what can we do to focus on helping the transition from traditional hardware reseller, box shifter to managed services, service provider, those kinds of things. So that's where I found technologies like remote monitoring, which is where I basically cut my teeth in the early days in the MSP space, and then have evolved from there to the point where managed services now is kind of the darling of the go-to-market strategies. I can go on and on and on. I don't know if you have another question there, but I can come back.
No, you're fine. You're fine. Well, just before we go into questions, I'm just going to ask Rick, can you please introduce yourself? I know most people would probably know you, but tell us a little bit about you, because you've also been in the industry for a long time.
I have. I'm trying to think of other people who have been in the industry longer than me. Rob is one of the few. Rob, I didn't know that you were a former Compact person.
Yeah.
Way back in the day, I was a Compact accredited Compact technician, an AXE. Do you remember
Tell me there wasn't anything better than ProLiant technology. Tell me that was not the best thing that was ever created,
Yeah, it's good to speak to somebody else who still remembers what that actually means. But yeah, in answer to your question, Fee, so my background was originally in corporate IT. And then I ran my own managed service provider business based in Birmingham in England. I sold that business about 9 years ago now. What I do on a day-to-day basis is I help educate other IT business owners, other MSP owners, to avoid the many mistakes that I made along the way, and to help them sort of accelerate their growth, really to free up their time and to make more money.
Brilliant. Well, thank you both for joining us. You're both experts in this industry, which is why I wanted to finish on this with the fireside chat. So, Rob, one of the reasons I invited you on the show was I read your article. You did a fantastic thought leadership piece around why the channel is stronger than ever. Can you share a little bit around that and your thoughts on why the channel is stronger than ever with our guest today?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot that kind of went into that, and actually the trigger for that was, COVID hits and becomes this worldwide pandemic that everybody's in kind of like panic mode about, and it's easy to doomsday it. I think the media around the world was making this sound like this was the end of the world, right? So I wanted to create a piece where you start thinking ahead, and this is literally at the time when everybody was kind of rushing to home office. And I start thinking ahead of what's going on. Like, what are some of the highlights that are going on here? And there was a lot of really, really good news that was coming out of it when you think about managed services as a whole. And then you start reflecting back as to what would have happened 5, 6, 7 years ago. And I think about 2008 as a perfect example. I'm based in North America. I'm actually Canadian. I live in the United States now. And back in 2008, massive recession in the United States, which impacted them significantly with the housing market just absolutely crashing. The whole economic system crashing, Wall Street shutting down, and spiraled it into a really, really bad recession. That was around the same time that we were having conversations about moving from one-time revenue to recurring revenue. And we were talking a lot about the benefits of moving to recurring revenue, and the benefits being healthy organization, predictable revenue, like all those wonderful things. But as somebody that was trying to sell software, particularly remote monitoring software, which is something that every MSP needs, it was slow going because, hey, I'm making a ton of money on my project work. I don't need to change that yet. Then recession, all that project work is put on hold. And the guys that made the transition to the recurring revenue, focusing on services rather than projects, were the ones that survived it, and the ones that actually had some predictable revenue, the ones that actually, in essence, had some growth. Because rather than charge you, $10,000, $20,000 dues for the actual project, instead, I'm now charging you a per month fee for just maintaining IT infrastructure, or that project's rolled into more of a recurring revenue rather than a one-time. So the big pill that they had to swallow in the US market was an easier one to swallow as a result of something like managed services. So now all of a sudden that catapulted the recurring revenue kind of theme. And that's when all of a sudden vendors like Datto, for example, were kind of birthed in that time frame where they're like, we can go pure channel, pure MSP and let them sell it on focus exclusively on the recurring revenue aspect, because that's what everybody wants these days. So that catapulted, and that's one of the reasons why I think the US market is probably ahead of the rest of the markets when it comes to managed services. It's very unusual for the Americans to lead anything as far as technology, but that I will give them credit for. But then they now see that expanded worldwide. So now COVID hits, okay? And I don't think, and I'm hoping that this doesn't lead to a worldwide recession. However, I think that the managed service providers are well placed to make it through this. They're well placed to financially weather the storm here as a result. And I think we're going to see another big bump towards managed services, especially for those that have been relying on the one-time revenue as time goes on. So there's a whole bunch of other pieces that kind of factor into that, like our reliance on technology as consumers. The whole work from home movement. Who's the first person you called? You called your IT department and said, what can we do here? The fact that managed service providers worldwide were labeled as essential services, the fact that we can literally say there's tens of thousands of small businesses and medium-sized businesses that are still working and providing their services today because of the channel. And again, I mentioned 5, 6, 7 years ago, this wouldn't have been possible. There literally would have been, I think, even more unemployment. I think there would have been more furloughing. I think there would have been a lot more business at risk of being out of business. And instead, IT has allowed people to continue to kind of function.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. And one of the things that I loved in your article, Rob, was about how a lot of those SMBs now see working with an MSP as an essential part of their business rather than a cost that they can cut, or rather than a nice to have. You've worked in the IT and the MSP industry yourself, Rick. What's your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I was really interested to hear Rob mention that period of time, sort of 2005 onwards, because that was when I was running my MSP business, and it was a time of great change. We were moving away from selling licenses and hardware. We were moving towards recurring revenue and that sort of model. Rob, there's a load of doom and gloom around now, and I can understand why, people would be fearful about the future. But, time of big change like this also brings loads of opportunities. What do you see the opportunities for managed service providers, coming out of COVID-19 and going forward?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think it's a question that everybody is looking for an answer for. Now, first of all, I do not have all the answers. Okay, if I did, I'd be making a hell of a lot more money than I am right now. So this is all I'll preface it with, this is all speculating based on kind of what I'm seeing in the market. So one of the benefits of my role is that I do get the chance to work with. We have about 20,000 MSPs that utilize our products. So I get a chance to talk to, and because I own that relationship with them, I get a chance to talk to thousands of them. And that's basically been my job since the beginning of COVID. I used to travel around to see you guys, but now I'm doing it from my home office. So talking to people around the world, what's going on? Where are they seeing growth? How is business? How are your end users? What are the verticals that are winning and the verticals that are losing? And it's ever changing, like day by day on these things. And it's also different per market. We're starting to see the return to the office in areas like Germany and Denmark. Sweden's going about this a completely different way, and the MSPs up there have got different challenges. The UK, I don't know what's going on in the UK. I can't quite put my finger on what you guys are doing. But
yeah, I've got all the answers.
Then you look at something like Australia, like they plan on being shut down for the next 10 years. So, there's like a whole bunch of different kind of ways in which the MSPs can leverage this. I think there's important things. I think, and it's going to be more of a general answer to your question rather than a specific one, but we're starting to get in and understand where those opportunities are going to be. And I think we could be more specific over the coming weeks as we kind of, the air clears, dust settles. I think that the relationship with the end users has changed. There's two things I'll focus on, and that's one of them, is that the relationship with the end user has changed. You are no longer the guy who comes and provides IT. Okay. This is now more of a consultant level relationship than ever before. And if you think about, you run into some troubles, you want to talk to your lawyer, and it's a consultation. You are trying to find some money, you talk to your accountant or your financial advisor. Now the IT relationship is more of a conversation than I need, you're going to get it. And this is where I think that opportunity comes in, that whole essential service part of this. Look, if I had told you 3 months ago, okay, that we would all be working from home, that multi-billion-dollar organizations' offices would be closed, that people would be running their businesses off of Netgear Wi-Fi networks they bought at their local IT Best Buy garbage shop and sharing that with your teenagers doing TikTok, you would have gone, Rob, you're crazy. So for us to think that this is the last time that this is going to happen, I think is naive. So I come, traditionally from the managed services space, and if you look at, say, like backup technology, you have a tendency to look at disasters from a acts of God, tornadoes, hurricanes, fires, floods. You start talking about security and ransomware. Now we have the ability to talk about continuity in a bigger scale, meaning what happens if the next pandemic? Now everybody can relate to it because it's happened to all of us. If I say, what if your building burns down? You're going to go like, that's a 1 in a million chance. But what happens if everybody now all of a sudden has to work from home and shift again? What's the strategy? What's the plan? The MSP can be integral in that conversation and that full continuity plan of pandemic happens, here's what happens. It's no longer what ifs. It is what happens next. I think the second part of it.
So they have to have that continuity plan in place. Otherwise, they don't get up and working as quickly as they could do.
Absolutely. And that is going to, because if this happened again, if we were planning for this, meaning the MSPs were planning for this, this would have been even more efficient than it was, more secure than it was, better experience than it was. So that's for me is kind of interesting plays there. How do we do that? How do we articulate that? We're working on that, and we'll get that. But I'm starting to see MSPs having those level conversations on a consultative, really integral part of business planning. And then I think the second part of this is, we started seeing pre-COVID, we started seeing managed service providers coming up market. And there was a few indications that I saw this. So rather than in the SME space, like starting to head into the mid-market to enterprise, large enterprise space. And it was co-managed, like working with an in-house IT team rather than the full outsource everything to me type conversations. And it was slow going, but it was moving. And a lot of us vendors had to change our technologies for MSPs to be able to do that, like share, say, your automation tool, like your PSA tool, or share your RMM tool with an in-house IT team. It's like, how do you sell to them? How do you get them to have a level of trust that they can bring another IT guy in, that you're not going to be replacing them? And we started seeing progress there. Now, all of a sudden, COVID happens, and that accelerator seems to have just been punched. Like, it is insane how much more business is now coming in from that mid to large market because of things like security and cloud and speed and even just finding product. Nobody is better positioned than the channel for that. An in-house IT team doesn't have the experience, the knowledge, the connections, the ability to execute on those things. So again, I think there's another big, massive opportunity. So to go back to your original question, Rich, there's a hole in our bucket. We're going to lose some business. There are going to be businesses that are going to go out of business. However, I think we can fill the bucket on the top with better opportunities and more water than what we're losing on the bottom once we start seeing some normalization here.
Good. Rick?
Can I ask Rob another question? Because you mentioned, I'm a techie geek. We've talked about that before. That's obvious. You mentioned, people working from home on this consumer tech that they've got around. And it's like, it was good enough, wasn't it, for the first few weeks? But now we're sitting here and we're like, I'm going to throw this monitor out the window. And if that broadband doesn't work, I'm going to boot the router out the door and stuff like that. Everybody's at home and sitting there and thinking, I even need to replace the office chair with something sensible.
Yeah.
So my question is around, obviously, Datto have got the managed networking gear that's there. I've not given this much thought, but is this an opportunity, to move that in, almost to be replacing the consumer tech in situations where people want to have a more permanent working from home solution?
So funny. I have when I do presentations, when I do presentations at events and when I'm in front of an audience of my channel peers, I love talking more about what tech is going to look like rather than what my organization does and what my technology does, because there's a big learning opportunity. If I can leverage the thousands of conversations that I've got and bring it back to a single MSP and help them grow their business, that's kind of my goal. So in conjunction with that, there's a piece that I was doing for a couple of years, which basically looked at what does an MSP look like 5 years from now. Okay. It was kind of the future look MSP. And there's about 10 things that I would focus on as far as technology goes. And the 10th thing that I talked about was the work from home experience. And this was, again, totally pre-pandemic. And again, like 90 days ago, 61 days ago, if I told you we'd all be working from home for 2 months, you guys would have said I was crazy. So what happens is that was number 10 out of 10 on my list, because if my time was shortened or if I went on too long about a different topic, I would cut that one right out, because the work from home experience was something that would have been labeled as 10 out of 10, like the most unimportant thing that I talk about back then. Now I look like a genius, but I didn't know it at the time. But what's funny, because going back to your question is, when you start talking to, or at least pre-COVID, when you started talking to an end user about the work from home experience, we've all actually seen this through things like work-life balance and the whole millennial conversation and wanting to have a better experience working. Most of us, some of us have home offices. But again, the experience there was something that we had to build ourselves. It wasn't something that the channel was regularly involved in, mostly because of price. Going out and getting a router at a local IT consumer store is a lot cheaper than buying it from a managed service provider with services attached to it and ongoing maintenance and yada, yada, yada. So a lot of times that was kind of dismissed as something as not as important. Now that, we're all in this situation, I think that there is a logical case to say we need to look at, when I'm saying MSP talking to an end user, we need to look at the experience in the office. We need to look at the experience at home so that you have this ability. Not only that, and you're starting to see it. And I don't like looking at organizations like Facebook and Twitter and things like that as employers. I think that's a bad example of the way the world is actually going to work, because I know Twitter just said to all of its employees, you don't have to come back to work if you don't want to, or back to an office, which, again, not a lot of people are going to necessarily take that approach. But I think it's something that we have to consider is this whole work from home thing. Like, if there's one area that I wouldn't want to be in right now, it would be commercial real estate. I think we're going to start seeing empty buildings everywhere, because we've been saying this for years, that people can work from home as effective as they can in the office. And now we're actually seeing it because we got forced to try it out. Everybody's seeing it, plus the massive cost savings as a result of not having offices, this is going to be a real thing. So is there an opportunity? Yes. Is it going to replace consumer grade technology at home? No. I don't want my kids on my Datto network here. I don't want them doing, because they do, God knows what they're doing. I have 4 teenage daughters, Richard. Like, come on. Right? No one wants to know what they are up to, right? I gave that up a long time ago. So I don't want them on my network. So it's going to be almost like a segmentation. I can, in essence, see that. You want to go buy your crappy, access point router firewall over at the consumer electronics store. Great. This part is going to be for your business. It's going to be safe. It's going to be secure. And that's the other thing. Like, security has been insane. The amount of hacker activity over the last couple of weeks has dramatically increased. Exposure has increased. They know that you're on weaker networks. They know that your security protocols are less than they were 2 months ago, and they're going to exploit it, and they're going to take advantage of it. And they are.
Yeah, we just had your other friend, Matt Solomon. We just had Matt on, actually, and he was sharing some crazy statistics about the amount of cyber attacks today. So, yeah, I think that's definitely on the rise. But just coming back to other opportunities, the opportunity, obviously, I see around security, around customers seeing working with an MSP as essential, improved remote working solutions. So I see all of that as an opportunity from an end user perspective. But as an MSP itself, do you see an increase now in MSPs using a PSA or an RMM tool? Because especially when you see, like, I had MSPs ringing me going crazy. They said, we've had a 60% increase in support tickets. Our desks are going crazy. We're finding it really hard to manage the tickets. And those customers who were using a PSA or an RMM tool, they were able to get in control of that much better. But resellers and VARs who maybe hadn't made that investment in those type of tools, I think they're now beginning to realize that actually they really need to look at what are the tools, what should they invest in. Are you seeing a big increase now in that?
Significant, absolutely significant. For us, I mean, as a vendor, that's one of our technologies. For us, it would have been product number 3 or 4. RMM specifically would have been product 3 or 4. PSA would have been product maybe 5 or 6 down on the where do we make money scale of all the technology that we sell. Today, it's number 1. Like, the nature of what's happened in the world and the necessity of think about even the definition of RMM, remote monitoring and management. Like, we don't want to go into people's homes right now and take a look at what's going on. We don't want to go into offices and take a look. You don't want to expose your staff that way. You don't want to expose your end users that way. So this is like the whole idea of being able to manage devices remotely, see what's going on in these environments, who's up, who's down, what's on fire, where do I need to pay attention, what are the problems that we're going to run into. Like, RMM technology for us, it became our number 1 seller practically overnight, because it was easy for our partners to turn around and start deploying licenses to additional devices that they've never had to before, nor would an end user typically pay for, but now they will. And and it's been a massive win for the channel. Like, if there's any pieces of technology that are kind of immediate opportunity, I would suggest that is it. I would suggest too that what we're also seeing is that MSPs that are not utilizing, or channel providers that are not utilizing RMM technology, are now getting edged out for those that are. Because when you've got an MSP that can go in there and say, I'm going to remotely manage your staff, I don't need to come and see them, I don't need to come into your home and do stuff. What's happening is that's replacing more of the traditional way of managing IT, which again goes back to the in-house IT teams. A lot of these guys don't have access to things like RMM technology. RMM technology has been a managed services play since day one. PSA technology has been a managed services play since day one. These are the things and the tools that give MSPs an advantage over an in-house IT team, or give them an advantage over the experience that an end user has with IT. So absolutely, it has been a significant win for sure.
You must have heard a lot from your partners saying, "Thank God we had your tool."
Oh, absolutely. How do I get more of it? And the great part about it too is that the first step, one of the things I love about our community, and it doesn't matter where you are in the world, I find this everywhere, is that we all kind of want to take care of each other. Like there's this camaraderie within our community that just happens. And when this happened, like first thing is we all ran out and took care of our customers, and all of our MSPs called all their end users and said, "What can I do? What can I do? What can I do?" All the vendors should have, and I know we did, call each of your channel partners and get your MSPs and go, "What can we do? What can we do? What can we do?" And part of that was, look, you're on fire. Your end user's on fire. You need to get technology out there to watch these guys. Here's RMM. Take as much as you want right now. We'll worry about it later. You can turn it off later if you're not using it. There's a whole bunch of vendors that were offering free products for short periods of time to be able to get through that transition. We saw that kind of real camaraderie happen right at the beginning around that. And that was kind of really cool to see. And a lot of the RMM vendors did that, including ourselves, where it's like, let's get everybody set and going, and then we'll worry about the paycheck afterwards kind of idea.
Yeah, I mean, I think without vendors and without partners like the ones we have in this community, because there was no way businesses would have got back up and running as fast as what they did. So I think what you did was right. And Rick, you were on the serving end of being an MSP, using a PSA and an RMM tool before. What's your thoughts on why partners should use that as part of their business now?
Yeah, well, I'll ask a question to Rob, but before we do, I want to say a public thank you to you, because you have been such a huge advocate for the managed service space. And from day one, you've been saying MSPs are the heroes here. They're the ones that are keeping the economy running. They're the ones who are keeping businesses running. So absolutely. If I've not said it to you before, mate, thank you so much for doing that, because MSPs needed to hear that at the time, that what they were doing was worthwhile, valuable, and needed. So thank you. But in terms of that, so you were at the coalface, you were helping partners when they saw this massive spike, didn't they, at the start of March? It was like, Fiona, you mentioned the statistics, some of your partners, 60% increase. That's like conservative from what I'm seeing. I was seeing people have hundreds of tickets come in, clients saying, hey, we need to get working from home this afternoon. Can you do that for us? Rob, my observation was that the MSPs who were dealing with that backlog within, say, 48 hours or so, were the ones that were using PSA tools, RMM tools. The others, and perhaps there's many of them watching today, have just got over that hump now and thinking, I don't want to get caught out like that again. So why is it that the MSPs who had that PSA and RMM tools were managing to deal with the tickets so much faster than the ones who weren't?
We've been talking about and kind of expanding the role of the managed service providers for years, right? Decades almost, and trying to leverage every angle of what an end user is paying for when you're paying for a managed service provider. And again, it goes beyond just technology. It's conversations like RTO and RPO, uptime. How do we make sure that you're up? How do we make sure that we're proactive and seeing things happening in environments prior to them becoming major problems? Looking at projects in a way where we can scope these things out and then prioritize and be able to say that these things are more important than these things because of the extra kind of view in an environment that you've got and that proactive look into the environment that you've actually got. So MSPs have kind of in a roundabout way been preparing for this for a long time, to the point that when the button was pushed worldwide and said everybody must stay home, we were in a better spot to be able to turn around and utilize that. I think the other big part of this too, that we kind of take for granted sometimes, is the amount of education. Prior to COVID, when we were talking about things like co-managed and going up market with MSP services, education was a big reason for that. The knowledge that a managed service provider or a channel provider has versus an in-house IT team is immense. We have seen technology change on such a significant and dramatic basis in much shorter periods of times than we've ever seen before. You and I were joking at the top of, I was mentioning ProLiant technology. I mean, that was a brand. I think a brand might still be around, but that technology is how old? We all kind of understand it. We all got it. And that was a good 5, 6, 7 year run for a box back then. These days, Even you mentioned Matt Solomon off the top. His technology wasn't here 2 years ago. And now all of a sudden you have dark web scanning and being able to proactively have conversations about dark web. Like that wasn't anything possible 2 years ago. So managed service providers are getting this level of knowledge because of things like what you guys are doing here today through education, right? You would go to events and trade shows. You would go to stands and talk to vendors that you've never heard of before because of natural curiosity around technology. An in-house IT guy doesn't get that opportunity. He doesn't get to surround himself with like-minded IT managers from other organizations from many parts of the world. I talk about this like a community. There are Facebook communities with tens of thousands of MSPs that share information every single day. And you might be sitting somewhere, say in Reading, UK, but there's a guy in Little Rock, Arkansas that has an answer to your question. We have the ability to connect those two, A, because of our community, B, because we identify the same, and C, because we have this want of knowledge and need of knowledge right now to be able to service our customers. In-house IT doesn't have that opportunity. So again, I think that goes back to your original question there, which is why we're seeing the MSP so much better prepared, is because of that education. What's important right now? What's not important right now? Where can we be focusing our time, energy, and money? We can have security conversations that are better than a regular in-house IT team because we're on top of all this stuff more so than anyone else.
Yeah, and then actually just to touch on the community part of it and the existing MSPs, Rob, who are using the PSA and RMM tools, I just want to share a short story with you. And in the community that we have in here in the Practice Builder Live, it used to be called the Mentori program. And one of the things that we used to talk about a lot is how can you demonstrate to customers as a managed service provider, how can you demonstrate what they're actually paying for, how can you show that it's worth them paying to have a managed service. And we've had a big community discussion even more recently because some customers have said we have to cut back our monthly recurring revenue, we want to ask for payment plans, we need to cut some costs, we need to cut back. And of course they were thinking about cutting back services off the managed service provider. But one of them in the community that we have said, let's produce these things called whilst you were sleeping reports. And the whilst you were sleeping reports were actually showing them everything that they had done whilst the IT people were sleeping. And in that report, they were using your executive summary report from your Datto tool. So again, that was another thing that came out in the community. Somebody had said, use the executive summary tool within Datto. So a really good way of helping them to secure their revenue and not get cut cost.
We were, again, pre-COVID, having conversations like we were all doing really well, growing like crazy, adding end users all the time. And the end user, the most ideal end user is the one that you have done such a good job at that you don't hear from them, they don't hear from you. Like the whole goal is to have as small touch as possible because everything is great. But then they start questioning, well, what am I paying for? If everything is so awesome, what am I paying for? And that's where, we were having this conversation because everybody was growing. We're all finding new business, but we weren't necessarily taking care of our existing business. And it's so important that you take care of your existing business. That's that whole bird in the hand is worth two in the bush kind of thing. So the idea of how do I keep them engaged? How do I get them to understand what they're paying for? And that conversation carries forward to now because people, again, like you said, and this is happening worldwide. They're trying to cut their costs. Yeah. First thing my wife did when this happened was she called our cable company, our insurance company. She called everybody that we had a bill to saying, what can you do for me to try to cut costs? That's what everybody, but it's automatic. Yeah. I'll tell you, not only did my cable company came back to me, who was also our Wi-Fi provider, came back to us and said, yeah, no problem. We can cut this. And then obviously my Zoom stopped working. I was the guy that was frozen on the screens and the grainy, that kind of thing. Then all of a sudden, again, literally it was instantaneous. And I'm like, what happened? And she said, well, I saved us $30 a month. And I'm like, turn it back on. So then she calls them back, at which point, then they upsold her to a $50 package that's going to make my Zoom calls even better. So I ended up paying more through this cost-cutting exercise. So think of it from that perspective. I think we're all in cash conservative mode right now. And that is an unfortunate, necessary thing that we all need to be doing right now is is looking at our bottom line, trimming the fat, looking for opportunities for us to save a few bucks. Okay. Yeah. That doesn't mean you have to say yes. There's a great line. I was on a call with another MSP the other day, and they said for every end user that calls and says we want to cut costs, that's great. I will cut your costs, but I'm also cutting your service. Make sure you're not doing what you were doing before. They need to see it, like I did with my Wi-Fi. They need to see, sure, you're going to get it. You want cheaper? No problem, but your experience is going to go down. And IT is so essential that we can't do these Zoom calls. And it frustrates you if you keep stopping and I can't hear you and all that stuff, to the point where people will pay more for that stuff. I don't think we're in a recession. This feels different than 08. It feels different than .com. I think that we all need to start going into recession, like almost depression type days. I don't know. And so far, the markets that are opening up, unemployment's coming back in, the jobs are coming back. The business is coming back. I'm hoping that this is just kind of a pause rather than a permanent setback, because there's a lot of really good indicators before this, and I think the pandemic's just impacting it. This isn't 08. This isn't .com. This isn't Richard. You remember the Spanish flu? You were back by then. This isn't the Spanish flu, right?
He's saying you were old enough, Rick.
Hey, Rob, I've got a question. Actually, you've very kindly come on my podcast, Tub Talk, before, and we've talked about mergers and acquisitions. And, it feels like a lifetime ago now, but it was like a year ago or whatever. Yeah. But obviously, the world has changed, and M&As and VC funding and private equity and all those sort of things. How do you see the managed service industry as a whole, and I'm including vendors in this? How do you see them being affected by the belt tightening and the change that's going on worldwide at the moment?
Yeah, it's that's a really good question. One would automatically assume, and I think initially out of the gate, I saw a lot of VC deals that were being pulled back. That's not a good indicator. Because there was a ton of VC, a ton of mergers, acquisitions, all that stuff was starting to happen. And even after, I think you and I did that interview a year ago up in Edinburgh, I think it got even better as after that interview, we saw a lot more deals. And MSPs that were selling their business were getting really good numbers for their actual businesses. There was a lot of VC coming into the market, a lot of private equity coming into the market, which is even better. I saw a lot of those deals pulled. I saw a lot of those deals put on hold. They're starting to happen again. I saw one of our vendor friends out of the southern part of the United States. Their round of funding was delayed by a couple of months, but just came through. So, there's still some optimism that this is the right play, that technology is nobody ever wants to say recession proof, but I would much rather be in this vertical than others right now. And again, the reliance on that technology, I think you're going to see that money come back. I know some MSPs that had themselves on the market and were selling, continued to sell, and you think all of a sudden your valuation is going to go and plummet, but it didn't. And again, these are things, because these are the side effects, and these are the benefits of being a managed service provider, is that recurring revenue, the stability of that revenue, the forward thinking of IT, being up to date on all this stuff. Something as simple as monitoring all your customers with RMM. Like those are the huge value adds that, regardless of what's going on, unless people start hating on technology and turning Wi-Fi off, I think it's always going to be around. And I think that's why we're going to continue to see VC, private equity, even mergers and acquisitions still continue to be a thing. Let's be realistic. If this continues, if we all get shoved back into our homes, if COVID-21 rears its head, then who knows? But right now, I'm still holding some good optimism there.
Good. I want your optimism. We need a little bit of it right now. So talking about optimism, Rob, I know you guys are doing a huge amount to help MSPs to not just survive, but to thrive throughout this. And Rick, I know you're doing a huge amount with the tech tribe and everything as well. So can we just touch on what are you both doing to help the community? And I know both of you will have some offers and some resources that partners can benefit from. Could you just tell us a little bit more about what you're going to offer there? And in the meantime, I'm going to ask partners to submit. So any partners online, submit your questions for us. So any questions you have for Rick or for Rob, just tap them in the chat box and I'm going to ask the question on your behalf. So over to you, Rob. Do you want to tell us, first of all, what are Datto doing to help MSPs to thrive?
Yeah, thank you. You mentioned optimism. I'm actually a natural negative person, and I've discovered that.
Never imagined that.
I am. I'm a pessimist. I am a born natural pessimist, and I learned this about myself early on in my career when I realized nobody liked me, and it was because I was always looking at the negative side of things and speaking my mind and always defaulting to the negative. That's an easy thing to do, a very easy thing to do, because it's always easy to point out everything that's wrong. So I, over the years, have really trained myself to be an optimist and look for that silver lining, to the point where now it's automatic. And I irritate people in other ways because I'm always no, it's not that bad. It's not that bad. And my wife just, sometimes she's just like, can you just hate on something, please? Just
That's like you, Rick.
So for me, I think optimism is something that we're all super hungry for right now. When you turn on the TV and watch the news, whether it's objective or not objective, when you plug in Facebook and see all the differing opinions on what's going on out there right now, when you have conversations with friends and family, sometimes it can really bring you down, and it's easy to be down. What our end users and our community and the people around you need right now is positive, right? And they need the positive messaging. They need to hear that it's all going to be okay. And this is where I'm constantly looking for those silver linings. Yeah, we have a hole in the bottom of our bucket and we're losing water, but where are we going to fill the top of it? And we won't even worry about that hole. You know what? Maybe we should be looking at the customers that we want to fire right now, the ones that we weren't profitable. Maybe this is our time to turn around to them and go, I don't want to do business with you anymore. And when you start kind of flipping the conversation around from that, that's where it makes a lot more sense. To go back to your question, what are we doing? So there's a lot of organizations, when these things happen, they come out with a big war chest and then a press release to say, we're going to give gazillions of pounds and dollars and whatnot back. And you don't even know what's going on yet, and we saw that within weeks, the first couple of weeks, them coming out with tons of free product with limited time offers, or buy this, get this for free. Let's be honest, everybody's looking for an angle. Everybody's looking for more licenses at that particular point, which is not what we needed at that particular moment. We took a different approach, and rather than create this, hey, nobody has to pay their bill next month, or hey, here's a big donation campaign that we're running, and we're going to give the money back to managed service providers. It wasn't resonating, because the conversations I was having with MSPs was, I will call you when I need you. Okay, right now I'm dealing with this. My hair is on fire. I will come back to you and I will tell you what I need, but I don't know what I need right now. I don't know if my bills are going to get paid. I don't know if people are going to survive this. Remember, we're still talking about a lot of death, right? So it was too early for us to create something. What we did was very simple. What do you need? Call us if you need us, right? And the first month of this, we probably got 1,000 calls a week from our partners saying, I need a contract extension. I need forgiveness this month. I need to cancel this contract. Some of the times it was just, I need help trying to collect a bill. I need finance help. I need HR help. My employees are depressed. I don't want to let them go. How do I retain them? I have to let them go. How do I do this and be civil about it? So sometimes it was just even business advice. Forget about financial advice, right? Or financial relief. So everybody had different needs coming through this, and it wasn't always tied to, I need more product or I need to save money. It wasn't always like that. So literally thousands of partners called us and we said, call us and we'll go through it. And I almost personalized a solution for people. But I'm very proud of my team, because I don't think there was a single partner we said no to. And whether that was financial help or business help or professional help or whatever it was, we were able to help. Now, we don't have a big press release that I can say, here's all the awesome things we did, because again, it's not about us. And so what are we doing right now? There's a couple different things. So Richard, you're absolutely right. I want to make sure that the MSP channel gets the recognition that it deserves, and the channel as a whole gets the recognition it deserves for what happened during this time. I want to come out of this where people are saying, thank God I had the managed service provider, I had the channel. Okay, because I would not have been able to do this. I would have had to let X amount of people go. I would have lost X amount of business. I would have lost my home, things like that. So what we have been doing is this MSP Rockstar series that you've been talking about, where we're actually gathering these stories. And there's millions of them. And MSPs are, and as channel providers, we're terrible at patting ourselves on the back sometimes. We need to pound our chests and go, we are essential services. We're amazing people. We do incredible things. Sometimes I don't think we take advantage of that. We tend to want to stay out of the spotlight. And I think that's not what we want. And what I want to happen to my partners coming out of this. So I'm going to put the spotlight on them as much as I possibly can. And I'm going to tell the end users that you need to be thanking your MSP. So that's some of the nicey stuff that we're doing. How are we helping actual MSPs? Obviously, call us if you need us, if it's something along those lines. But we've been able to gather some tools. Like, we're trying to mitigate our way through this as an organization. So I'm looking at us. We're 1,700 employees, 35 offices worldwide, multi-billion dollars of business going around this space. You know, how are we thriving and surviving through this? So our marketing team came up with this kind of plan, this communication plan, and it was all these different phases through pandemics. And I asked, where did you get this? And of course, we're owned by a VC company that is, $50 billion portfolio. They have these assets. There's tons of stuff that larger organizations just have at their fingertips because they have MBA students that can write this stuff for you. So I'm like, let's take this stuff, let's white label it, and let's give it to the SMBs. So I got a bunch of that stuff, like that communication plan, for example. I mentioned that your sale with your end user is changing to a more consultative sale. How better than to start having the conversation with them as to what their end user businesses are going to look like in 2 months, 3 months, 4 months from now. And you're the one that is actually leading that conversation. Yes, we're dealing with this right now, but let's start talking about 6 months from now. And for you to be able to spell it out in a way where you've got a tool that millions and millions of dollars have been spent on by large organizations, and I'm giving it to you, white labeled, beautiful. You look organized. You look like you know what you're talking about, your expertise, you've thought about this, okay? So there's a communication program, marketing communication program. There's checklists that we've got that you can white label and use, again, to go and have these conversations with your end users to say, here's what's next. Here's what we're going to start working on. And all of those are available to anybody that wants them. You don't have to be a data partner. You don't have to pay for them. You don't have to do a sales demo or anything stupid like that. You literally can have these tools, because I'm a big believer that high tides float all boats, and we all need to get through this. And the more of us that survive this, the more we will all be better for this as time goes on. So those tools are, if you want them, salestools@datto.com. You can get those, email bounce back. You have direct access to them. There's things like security checklists in there, which will help you to have security conversations about not only the office and home, marketing plans, those kinds of things. So well beyond the financial help that people were looking for at the beginning. And we're continuing to evolve that.
Brilliant. Well, thank you. I mean, I know quite a lot of the partners actually that work with Datto, and a lot of them have been singing your praises about the amount of support you have given them. So massive thank you for everything you've done for those partners. Rick, what about you? I know you're also offering a lot of free support for partners to get them through this.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you mentioned the Tech Tribe. I'm going to rewind a little bit. So for people who are not familiar with the Tech Tribe, it's an online MSP community. It's a paid community. So people might ask, well, why are you asking me? We're tightening our belts. Why are you asking me to pay to join a community? Well, unlike the Facebook groups and unlike Reddit and all those things, which can be like the Wild West, the Tech Tribe, we've got a real community of people, just like Rob said, who want to help one another. A rising tide lifts all boats. If I'd have had the Tech Tribe back when I was running my MSP, I can tell you my life would have been a whole lot easier. But what we're doing in the Tech Tribe, membership's going up, and we're finding we've got like two types of MSPs that are joining us. The ones who really want to survive at the moment, And so we've got a COVID-19 war room, and we're giving as much help there to help people to get through and survive. But we're actually finding we've got a ton of members who are thriving at the moment. And that's a challenge of a different sort. So just today, for instance, the founder of the Tech Tribe, Nigel Moore, we released a new checklist for onboarding clients in the right way. Because one of the challenges that MSPs have got at the moment, the MSPs who are thriving, is bringing new clients on board and doing it in a structured fashion rather than just absolute chaos. So if anybody's interested in the Tech Tribe, wants to be a part of a community where they can ask a question without being shot down, without being told they're an idiot, without being told, hey, look, I'm the smartest person in the room, you need to listen to me. And I know that happens a lot in a lot of the other communities out there. The Tech Tribe is a nurturing place. It's a friendly place. It's a place where you can go and ask for help, and we will give that help. And for anybody who's watching today, you know, 2 resources that I'll mention, you can probably see in the background here. But my book, The IT Business Owner Survival Guide, you know, I wrote that about 3 years ago. And as you can imagine, sales of that have really gone up at the moment. We're giving that away. If anybody joins the Tech Tribe and, you know, is on this webinar, drop me an email. I will send you a copy of that. I'll send you a signed copy, but the unsigned copies are worth a lot more. And another shout out as well. So every new member of the Tech Tribe gets a copy of this book, Price Profit from Nigel Moore. If you're concerned about how to package up your MSP offering, that is the book to go to with Nigel's advice there. So that's not a plug, that is help. You know, we've got a community that is helping people to grow. I wish it was around when I was doing my MSP thing, but it is around now. So what I said right at the start of this, I've made loads of mistakes, and I'm trying to educate other people to not make those mistakes. You know, don't try and do it on your own. Try and find help from other people, and that's what the Tech Tribe is there for.
Yeah, and I think that's why I love both of your communities, actually, and the Practice Builder Live and the Tech Data community is the same, where, you know, you have partners that are really bending over backwards to help each other today and to support each other through this. And I think that's going to be critical to all of us coming out of this and thriving, not just surviving. So Rob, a final tip before we run out of time. What's your last parting bit of advice for MSPs and resellers and buyers who are on today's calls? And where can we follow your MSP rock stars? And we're just going to put up the email for you so that we can also see where partners can get the free resources as well.
Okay, so first of all, let me endorse actually what Richard was talking about, because we get involved in a lot of different peer group communities, and they're almost therapeutic. And Richard is absolutely right. I personally avoid Reddit. You can learn a ton from Reddit, but there are just so many trolls, and it is hard to weed through who is who, and you can't validate whether this person's opinion is worth anything. So personally, as much as we should be and can learn a lot from it, I cannot look at it. It depresses me. However, there are communities like Richard's, for example, that it's therapeutic. Like it is, I can't endorse it enough, because it makes you feel better. It lets you know that you're not alone. It lets you know that there is a bright side. It shows you firsthand that there are people out there that are making money right now if you're struggling. The networking ability of it, the camaraderie of it, like that is just so important right now. It goes well beyond virtual happy hours. I'll give you that. So I cannot endorse that enough, for sure. And you know, Nigel equally is brilliant, and we've done some work with him as well, as Richard here. Words of advice. Okay, so take advantage of the opportunities that are being presented by the vendors. We refer to our customers, because we're MSP only, we refer to you guys as partners, and we literally do think of this as a partnership. So please take advantage, and there's a lot of us. It's not just me. My competitors do exactly the same thing. We care about this. We all want to make it through this. We want to help our partners survive this, because we are relying on you guys, and you guys are on the front lines. Take advantage of that knowledge, information. The tools, I'm genuinely sincere. This isn't a bait and switch. You're not gonna get a demo or an offer for free product. I'm literally trying to help our community through these things. I'm a very much a give and thou shall receive type individual, and our organization functions that way. So please take advantage of those things, because we can definitely do that. And then most importantly, I think this is a good opportunity for, if you're a leader, take care of your staff. Don't forget about them. Take care of your end users and don't forget about them. One of the things and one of the most effective things that I've actually seen is that there is an MSP who's just reaches out to people on a regular basis, prospects, his own end users, and just says, is everything okay? Is there anything I can help you with? And that's it. Very simple, very plain. And it's amazing how much business he has pulled out from that, because people will come back and go, you know what? I do need help with this, or I do need help with that. Worldwide, we're all dealing with different issues than we dealt with 60 days ago. Alcoholism is up. Youth is up. Like, there are just some terrible things that are happening with us. We're very social creatures, right? We should be all standing in a bar or a pub right now having a pint. We shouldn't be, trapped in our homes, crawling up the walls. Like, my Australian leader lives, like, he just got married and lives in a 300 square foot apartment. Like, I feel terrible for him because he's been in there for 60 days. And it's like, you cannot, like,
he's probably going to get divorced before they get out.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So this is where it's like, let's look at the human aspect of this. And I think more that you can leverage the human aspect, be positive, be a leader, tell people you care, ask them what you can do to help them. I think that's where you're going to win. And that's where you're going to get a lot of attention right now. And I think that's where you're going to get a lot of attention once all of this is over. You were the sign. My father used to say this to me all the time, but the sign of a man or of a person is not how you react during the good times. It's how you react during the bad times. Yeah. And if we can rally together, be leaders, be optimists, be powerful, motivational people through this, even if it's not natural to you, find it. People will be attracted to that more than they are the doom and gloom that's surrounding them day in and day out.
Brilliant. Great advice. Thank you, Rob. And Rick, what about you? Final bits of advice.
Yeah, I think it's a message for everybody who's watching at home here. So you've heard Rob talk about it. You've heard me talk about it. We're not making this stuff up. 20 years experience in the MSP industry, we have learned that doing it on your own is not the way forward. So if you're feeling isolated, if you're feeling as though you've not got the answers right now, there are people out there who want to help you. And if you're being slightly cynical and thinking, well, why would a perfect stranger help me and my business, especially if that stranger is a competitor? I can tell you I've done this for a long time, and there are loads of people like this out there. There are loads of people in the tech tribe. There's loads of people in the Datto community. We've not even mentioned CompTIA and so on and so forth. There is a wealth of knowledge out there. So please don't try and do this on your own. Speak up, ask for help, and people will offer help. So I think for me, that's the bottom line. You've heard me and Rob talk about it. Fiona's a big fan of the community as well. Everybody wants this industry to thrive, and not only to survive, but to thrive as well. Please don't do it on your own. Reach out for that help. And the first place I would turn to is your vendor partners, such as Datto. Phone them up and say, hey, I've got this problem. How can you help with it? And they're going to point you in the right direction.
Okay, well, great bits of advice. And just to echo that, I would also like to say all of the partners here as well, I completely agree with both of you. You don't have to do it alone. You have a huge community here with Datto, with Tech Tribe, with the Tech Data guys, so do tap into those communities, because you don't have to do it by yourself. And I personally would like to thank Seamus Quinn from my IT department, who is a Tech Data and also a Datto partner actually as well. And he stepped in, so I didn't have to do this by myself alone as well, and let me use his office today. He's sitting 2 meters opposite me and he has been here as my tech support to make sure that this all went smoothly today as well, and our Disruptive Live team as well, which have been helping us. So when you come together as a team, it's amazing what you can pull off even at short notice. So please do reach out to the communities that the guys have given you access to. So Rob, I was hoping to see you in June at DattoCon. I don't know if that's going to be on yet, but I really, really want another conference, so I hope to see you at it.
Unfortunately, we have postponed June. We're still hoping for Berlin in October. So
we will be in Berlin. So until the next time we meet, guys, thank you so much for joining us. You've had an incredible value, and I really appreciate your time. So, gosh, we've come to the end of today. I can't believe how fast today has actually went. And I hope you have all really thoroughly enjoyed the sessions and you've got huge value from it. Just as a wrap up, I think we have some people from Tech Data team who are our hosts and sponsors for today. And they are just going to come on and say thank you to our speakers. So let me see, who do we have from Tech Data? Okay, we have Lawrence, we have Marie. Who else do we have from Tech Data? I can't hear you. Okay, I can see you, but I can't hear you.
Hello, is Heather coming on? She was also a big organizer.
Thank you.
Yeah, I can see Lawrence and Heather. Is Heather coming on, Andrew?
We should just have Heather as well.
Okay.
I think Heather has bailed on us, but thank you everybody for everything you've done, and thank you Fiona for being a wonderful host, and it's been a great session.
Brilliant, thank you, and thank you
thank
to Tech Data for hosting it, and obviously for the Disruptive Live team as well. Thank you very much. Just as a leaving comment to all the partners who have joined. So again, thank you very much for joining us. There is a huge amount of resources that all of the speakers have given to you today. So we will have a follow-up email that will come out as soon as we finish today or tomorrow morning maybe, and that will give you access to all of the resources that the speakers talked about. But I'd also encourage you to get in touch with your Tech Data representative to take more involvement in the Practice Builder Live program. Because not only do you gain access to all of the live sessions that we have run today, you will also gain access to technology assessments to see if you're ready to set up a really good cloud practice, security practice, IoT practice. So please make sure you reach out to your Tech Data representative to find out what else can you utilize within the Practice Builder Live program to make sure that your business doesn't just survive throughout these challenging times, but it actually thrives. So I hope you've enjoyed today. Please give us a thumbs up or get those hearts going, your light bulbs moments, whatever social site you're on, just to let us know that you've enjoyed today, or let us even have some feedback and let us know what you'd like us to cover in the next Practice Builder Live that we run. But for now, I'm going to love you and leave you. I hope you have a lovely weekend, and I hope you have enjoyed the session. So over and out from here.